What's up, Flaniverse and Endgamers? We are here to talk about the two-game Monday Night Football slate. Should be a fun one. We've got Tampa Bay and Baltimore starting things off, followed by, I'm already blanking on who the second game is. Cardinals and Chargers. I've done a lot of research on the games. Should be a fun one. Adam and I are going to break down the two-game slate to start on DraftKings. So we're going to go position by position, just like we usually do: quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. We're just going to go position by position for the two-game slate. So we're going to look at the ownership, pricing, etc. for the two-game slate to start for the first hour. Then Adam is going to drop off, go make his lineups, because he's won big on when we've done these two-game shows slates before. He has won big, so he wants to win big again. So Adam's going to drop off, and then I will talk solo about the showdown slates for, I don't know, half an hour to 45 minutes after Adam leaves. Try to get out in good time so I can make my lineups as well once we're done. While you're coming in, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, regardless of which channel you are on. This is streaming to both the Flannelverse and Endgame Syndicate, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel you're watching on, but also check the links in the description of this video to find the other channel. Make sure that you're subscribed to both channels, as we are both trying to grow channels. We're both very new to our own channels, so we would appreciate it if you would subscribe, trying to grow the channels. Like the video, comment, all of that is very helpful as we try to grow the channels. Appreciate seeing several of you in here already. Looks like you guys are ready to win some money. Unlike yesterday, Adam, I don't know about you, I did not win any money yesterday. I think I lost like 80% on that slate. Did you have any luck yesterday?
Yeah, I had a good day yesterday. Made like 10 or 11K on the main slate. Didn't have good showdown slates, but finished like 18th in the Millie Maker on DraftKings. I won the $4.20 max on DraftKings. Kind of frustrating because I played 20 lineups in the $100 Millie Maker, and then I played 150 in the $10.
Okay.
And I sorted my stuff like specifically for the $100 Millie Maker and the 10, and I played the $10 sort in like all the other large field stuff. And so I won like the $4.20 max with a top 20 lineup from my $10 sort that would have finished second in the $100 Millie, but did not make like those 20 lineups. So that was annoying, but yeah, it was a good day overall.
Yeah, it didn't work out perfectly. Yeah, I forgot. We were talking about it yesterday. You had a sweat with Tutu Atwell. If he had just like scored a touchdown late, that they gave the ball to literally some random receiver. I want to say Xavier or something, who I'd never heard of before. But as I said to you, I was like, Tutu would have gotten in there. Like he's speeding up. Why are you giving it to this random guy instead of Tutu Atwell? He could have scored a touchdown for you. You had some.
That drive was frustrating. It was like,
there
was that run, and then it was like the next drive, just like everything to Tyler Johnson. But I dropped pretty far when Pierce kicked that stupid field goal for no reason because I had the Rams defense
that was
too.
So dumb.
But then I did get most of it back because they threw like a third down screen to Atwell, and then they got an interception in the game. So I at least kind of ran good at the end to not be too pissed off.
Yeah, one more catch for Atwell. Yeah, that is good. But yeah, you had a real shot at winning the Millie Maker. Would have been fun, although you would not have shown up for the show. I'm pretty confident Adam would have just dropped out. You would have never seen him again on shows if you won the Millie Maker. So we're lucky that Adam did not win the Millie Maker when he had a sweat yesterday.
Twitter would already be deleted, and
yeah, for sure. Adam, we would never hear from him again. Yeah, I could see how it goes. All right, we're gonna go position by position here, as I've already alluded to. I should know. So up on the screen right now is Roto Grinders Lineup HQ. And of course, if you are interested in signing up for Roto Grinders, actually, I think you can use promo code Flannel for $10 off. I only have NFL in the description. I'm doing an affiliate deal. I should talk to them about NBA starting tomorrow as well, but you can check that out. And then of course, I have the biggest discount ever for fantasy points. If you use promo code Flannelverse, you can get it for 50% off any package at Fantasy Points. So if you're interested in all the other tools that we're using here, those are going to be Fantasy Points tools. If you're interested in those, you can use promo code Flannelverse for 50% off. And of course, Adam's Substack you can find in the description of this video. We can talk about that more later. But if you're not already subscribed, highly recommend signing up for Endgame Syndicate, or at least Adam's Substack, to get access to all of his stuff. All right. Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert are our quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson is 8,000 projecting at Roto Grinders for 46% ownership. Baker Mayfield, 6,800 projecting for 20.5% ownership. Kyler Murray, 6.5K projecting for 19%. Justin Herbert, 5.5K projecting for 14.5% ownership. I have thoughts on a quarterback that I really like here, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Adam. I want to hear if we are on the same quarterback today. Where are you going with quarterbacks right now?
Yeah, so I ran before the show. I went ahead and just ran the lineups that like I would be playing if the slate had started right now, and then right now I just screwed something up, so I can't see
Okay.
any of it. Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I guess I didn't screw it up. It looks like right now I would just have pretty much all Lamar, which I think is going to change. So, yeah, I don't really know what happened, but right now I have a ton of Lamar, pretty
I mean,
much
it's good.
everywhere. Yeah, I
Good in a
mean, I
good
don't
matchup.
hate it. Like, if he's going to get like 45 to 50% ownership, and then the other three guys are going to be like 15 to 20%, I don't necessarily know that he's really any more overowned than they are. So just going to him does make some sense to me. You do run into, and this is kind of what I was trying to work on before the show, and I didn't get it set up exactly how I wanted. Like, you are going to run into more dupe issues, obviously, if you just play the 50% on quarterback, because
Yeah.
you have less options to be different, clearly. So that'll be an issue. But just from like a ownership versus chances of being optimal standpoint, I don't necessarily know that Jackson's like a worse play, even though the ownership is higher. And with the stuff that I ran before the show, he's just in everything.
Yeah, I mean, hard to argue with it. Again, great matchup against Tampa Bay. You look at scheduled. He is not the quarterback. I should say that from the start. He's not the quarterback that I'm talking about, but really can't argue with it. Number 2 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed are the Bucs defense, and also if you sort by rush specifically, they allowed the most schedule adjusted fantasy points to running backs on the ground. So obviously for Lamar Jackson, seems like a great spot against the Bucs. Really can't argue with that. Seems fair to just jam in Lamar if that is what you want to do and just get different elsewhere. Not the quarterback that I was alluding to. I was alluding to Baker Mayfield. Just strikes me as facing a defense that has given up the most yards per game through the air, and the Bucs have the 8th most passing yards per game on the season. Everything's heading up there, but then really it also, so it's the matchup looks really good for Baker Mayfield, but also I love the different options that you can pair him with. I mean, obviously Chris Godwin, obviously Mike Evans, Kate Otten, actually like nearly 5 targets per game so far this year, is looking more like a usable tight end. Last year he ran all the routes. This year is running all the routes and actually being targeted a little bit. So he's kind of interesting. I also really like Sterling Shepard as a low owned option at wide receiver. So to me, like because of all of the Bucs passing game options and the matchup, and the relatively low ownership, he is the one that I think I'm going to be like heaviest over the field on. I might even end up with Baker Mayfield as my highest owned quarterback. But again, I'm not shocked to hear that your Sims are giving you a ton of Lamar Jackson.
So
okay,
I uploaded the wrong set of lineups.
Okay, cool.
So
you can
trying to adjust that now.
All right. Well, then
I
will.
Yeah, I was trying to change like 3 different things before the show and put the wrong thing in.
All right. Well, you redo that, and I will.
I will say, I agree with you that Mayfield's going underowned. I think he's the most underowned quarterback on the slate with my stuff right now.
Yep. Yeah, Steven bringing up the Najee Harris touchdown when the game was completely out of hand. Like they shut him down all game. I was fading the Steelers running back, so I was happy with it all game. Finally, because of flash draft, I really wanted Najee Harris to score a touchdown in the third quarter. I took him in the third quarter flash draft, and he had multiple. They had multiple looks from the 1 yard line, and he didn't get either of them. And then he scored, of course, in garbage time in the fourth. So it was just the worst case scenario for me with Najee yesterday. I thought they're out. Any injury? So inactives haven't come out yet. We're doing the show earlier than usual. Usually I wait until 90 minutes prior to games, but because it's the full 2-game slate, we don't have inactives yet. So no real injury updates to speak of tonight. But we'll get those during the show. The inactives will come out for at least the first game.
Yeah, Ali and Payne Durham are out, but I don't think those really mattered.
Yeah, and I think that so I guess depends on your time frame. Since when injury updates? We'll get inactives during the show, so we'll of course check on those when they come.
Okay, so I just fixed my stuff.
Go ahead.
Now I'm more. I don't have any Herbert right now across 50 lineups.
Okay,
but I am over the field on Kyler. I'm over the field on Mayfield, and then I'm under the field on Jackson. Like 25 to 40% of all 3 of those guys, but getting more Kyler and Mayfield than Lamar now, which I think does make sense given the ownership.
Okay, I was curious if that was going to be the same for you, and it wouldn't have shocked me either way. But that's good to hear that at least the Sims are kind of more on the same page of what I was thinking. Like just intuitively, it seems like too low of ownership for Baker Mayfield, given just how good he's been this year. He's also running for like 23 yards per game so far this year. So like not a complete non-factor with a couple rushing touchdowns, same number of rushing touchdowns as Lamar. So obviously not rushing to the same extent as Lamar, but not a complete zero there either. So yeah, glad to hear we're on the same page there.
And I'm not sure if you made the point when you were talking about him either, because I was like panicking trying to figure out what I did wrong. But another thing for Baker that isn't the case for Lamar necessarily is, not only is obviously the raw ownership lower on Baker, so you're just going to have a little bit less of an issue with dupes, but he does have more potential guys to throw to, realistically. Like obviously the Ravens have the same number of players, but like you can make an easier case for moving down kind of the receiving list on Tampa Bay when you include, Otten and Shepard, who's low owned. I know you did mention that. Obviously Godwin and Evans give you two really good receiving options. With the Ravens, like, yeah, you have Andrews, you have Likely, but they are still just going to be paired with Lamar a lot. Flowers is like clearly the one. So I don't know. It seems like from a pass catching like ownership standpoint and Mayfield's raw ownership, like it's just going to help alleviate your dupe problem too, the ways that you can stack Tampa Bay compared to Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, you did kind of expound on my point. I was just making fun of. Yeah, I made that exact point of I like the several different receivers you have for Baker Mayfield, but you did expand on it a little bit. So yeah, well said. You can avoid some more duplicates. We also we haven't talked about so it's a 2-game slate, and we probably should talk about like some general things that we like to do on 2-game slates. One of those, of course, is overstacking, like over game stacking. Do you think that's something that you are going to be doing a lot of today?
I think it is a way to be somewhat different is different stack types. Like looking right now, if the slate started right now, my two highest stack types would be 3-1 and 3-2 on DraftKings, which I think is fine. I do think that's something that kind of does go overlooked, especially on smaller slates, is that it's not just the individual players and the way that they're paired together. You can be different just by, putting your stacks together differently in terms of numbers.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Leaving salary on the table, is that something that you force at all? I mean, I guess you're using Sims, so I would assume they kind of try to factor in dupes at least to some extent.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's fine. I do it more in Showdown, but like I also don't care about dupes as much as some people do because I know I'm not particularly good at it. Like I'm kind of at a point right now, and it's something I've been working on all season, but I haven't really gotten good at it. I'm kind of at a point right now where like I kind of aim for avoiding the most heavily duped teams, and then just kind of accepting like I'm not going to solo win 500K, but I'm going to play lineups that are still plus EV, even though you could, if I were to get good at or better at the dupe thing, like I can play better lineups. But I'm kind of at that point right now where it's like I'm playing good lineups because if I worry too much about dupes right now, I end up just playing shit lineups. So it's kind of the salary thing. I think kind of depends on your strategy and like how good you are at balancing everything, because just saying like, oh, I'm going to leave salary on the table, you're just going to play a bunch of bad lineups. So you have to like be able to balance all of that and be really good at it, I think.
Yeah, I think, and well said. It's something that I honestly have never done in prior years. All right, I think I've toyed with it here or there on 2-game slates. I always do it with Showdown. I always leave salary on the table. But 2-game slates, part of it was I tried looking at what other people are doing, like what are the pros doing on 2-game slates in Fantasy Cruncher, and there was always like an error with the salary, so I couldn't tell if like I kept on like I looked several different times, like is Brick leaving salary on the table, or some of the better players, are they leaving salary on the table on these 2-game slates, and just never seemed to work when I was looking at it. But I've heard more discourse about leaving salary on 2-game slates, which makes sense to me. And I've started doing it a little bit more this year.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, just from the stuff I've looked at, I think Shady's probably the best right now at playing really good lineups and avoiding dupes on, in dupey sports and small slates. But like, and this is kind of the point that I was making too. I've looked before, like I'll change something in my process where I'm trying to, be better about avoiding dupes. And I'll look and like my average salary left on the table is very similar, but I just played a bunch of shitty 48K lineups, whereas he somehow found like the best 48K lineups that nobody else is playing. So it's still just, there's a lot of other things that you have to factor in.
Yeah, a lot of different levers you can pull in trying to get unique. I'm trying to think what else is there. So leaving salary on the table is something you can at least consider if you like your lineup and you're leaving salary on the table. I think it's worth doing on a 2-game slate. Overstacking is another way to get a little bit different. Obviously, like different types of combos, like using two I was talking with Shrek. Shrek actually texted me because he saw that we were going to go live and gave me his great idea of, and I think it is an interesting idea of leaving or playing both Chargers running backs on the same team, for example. I think that sounded, he suggested, he was like, with all the injuries to the wide receivers, I think he's okay with me talking about this because he texted me before my show. He knew I was going on a show, so I assume he's okay with it. But he was saying that he thinks that it's an interesting idea to use both Chargers running backs in a lineup with all the injuries to the wide receivers. And I think that is an interesting way to get different. So yeah, there are a few other levers to pull, but I guess as we talk throughout the show, maybe I'll come up with what some of those are. A lot of ways to get a little bit different though. And I'm with you. Like, I'm not really trying to get unique in the sense of having the lineup. I'm the only person with the lineup. I'm trying to avoid the most duped lineups in general, I think is really what we're trying to do. I mean, we're really trying to maximize EV, which is kind of a mix of different things.
Yeah, like I'm scrolling through the lineups right now that I'd be playing. Because like I said, I was kind of trying to work on things before the show, and like I have lineups that they have 50K, they have 49.9. They're gonna be played, but like Sterling Shepard's in one at 5% ownership, Aguilar's in one at sub 5% ownership. So I don't think it's gonna be a unique lineup, but I'm not worried about that lineup being duped like 100 and something times either.
Yeah. Is this a real? I just have to ask. John says, "Good running into you at Pickles Pub." Is this a joke or is that a real thing?
No,
Run into somebody
saw me after the Ravens game. I was still borderline coherent at that point. My night got a lot worse, as you know. But yeah, it was good running into you too.
I wasn't sure if that is like Pickles Pub. It sounds like it could be a gay bar, so I thought it might be like a joke that I shouldn't like.
It's one of the old. It's like the spot where everybody pre and post games Orioles and Ravens.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Somebody had asked about, and I've lost it now, about Kyler Murray. I think that is so an interesting observation. Joey Bosa out, which does really affect the defense of the Chargers. I think it affects things pretty significantly. So, you look at schedule adjusted stuff for the matchup for Arizona, and it doesn't appear to be a great matchup with the Chargers just based on schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. The Chargers run so much that you kind of think like maybe they do slow the game down enough that's why this is happening. I don't think they have a particularly great defense, but Joey Bosa being out clearly is going to help there a little bit. I think you said that you're getting to above the field on Kyler also.
Yeah. Kyler and Mayfield right now, at least, are my two highest owned quarterbacks. And like, again, I think it makes sense. You're just getting basically half the ownership to a third of the ownership is Lamar. They're cheaper too. So like you can get better players with them. So I think it's just that, he's good enough. The ownership is low enough that he looks pretty good.
Yeah. All right. I guess we can take a look at the schedule adjusted stuff for anybody else. So it's obviously a great matchup for Lamar, as I already mentioned. Great matchup for Baker. Particularly against the pass, the Baltimore defense giving up the second most schedule adjusted fantasy points through the air to quarterbacks. So really nice matchup for Baker also. And then more middling matchups for Kyler and Justin Herbert. Looks like it's a positive matchup, but it's like the 12th best schedule adjusted matchup. Slightly worse for Kyler, but then of course no Joey Bosa obviously helps there as well. Anything else to say about, you say you're not getting to any Justin Herbert across 50 lineups?
I'm not right now. I think I'll say I think the reason for that is probably just that he has like the same ownership as Kyler and Mayfield, and they look better to me and also under-owned. So I'm just going to end up getting to them more. And like, I don't want to give up too much Lamar. I'm already under the field, but I still want to be getting to him, obviously. Yeah, no,
I'm not sure if I'm going to get to any Justin Herbert. It feels weird because like I think he's a really good quarterback. He's in a pretty good matchup with the Cardinals. Like it seems like he's the cheapest by far. So that would be the one thing. Like maybe if there's a lineup that I can only get to with him because of the salary, I might play it. But I'm not like forcing I don't think I'm going to force myself to Justin Herbert just because the other three look so good and he's still getting ownership. So yeah, I think we are on the same page there.
I also bet his over touchdowns, so I at least have some sort of hedge there.
Nice little hedge. Yeah, nice. Anything else on quarterbacks?
No.
All right, let's move on and talk about running backs. So by fantasy points, the highest projection, J.K. Dobbins actually projecting better here than Derrick Henry. The usage obviously pretty elite for J.K. Dobbins. Just looking at, just the full season, it looks great. Now we have no Gus Edwards. Now, of course, Kamani Vidal came on last game, look good there, but still had last week, J.K. Dobbins, 25 carries, sort by week here, 25 carries last week. Wait, hang on. 25 carries, how many? 2 targets on 26.3. So the route participation was not that great for J.K. Dobbins last week. I think he has like 13 targets on the season. Yeah, 13 targets, 42.3% route participation on the season. I wonder why it went down last week. It's kind of interesting that it came down. Maybe is it because Kamani Vidal was there?
Yeah, 24% route participation for Kamani last week.
Okay, so maybe he cut into it. So maybe that is a downside to J.K. Dobbins with Kamani Vidal taking over for Gus Edwards. With Gus Edwards there, like Gus Edwards just not really running routes, whereas Kamani Vidal will. Yeah, so maybe that cuts into J.K. Dobbins just a little bit, but still 25 carries, saw a couple targets, usage really good. I think both places I've looked, he's actually the maybe higher projected than Derrick Henry. He projects really well regardless. So starting with, the top, how do you feel about J.K. Dobbins, Derrick Henry, James Conner, and then we can get into the rest. But those three are the three that are getting a ton of ownership. How do you feel about these ownership numbers?
Yeah, so I sort of have them flipped in my exposures to an extent. Like right now I have basically 75% James Conner and the field's projected for, 75, 80% J.K. Dobbins. So, and then I have Dobbins as the middle guy there at about 54%. Which is pretty close to Henry's projected ownership. And then I'm getting about 38% Henry, which is not too far off of Connor's projected ownership. So I do have more, like those are my 3 highest owned running backs. Same for the field. I think that just makes a lot of sense. But I did kind of flip it where Connor's my highest owned guy there, whereas for the field, I think he's going to be the lowest. So kind of going back to like what we were saying before too, you can only get so creative on the 2-game slate before you're just like punting money. I don't think that playing a bunch of James Conner and cutting some Dobbins and Henry is lighting money on fire. I think if I told you that like Justice Hill is my highest on running back, then I'm burning money. So there's only like so many ways you can go. I think this is a pretty reasonable way to approach it.
Yeah, agreed. And it was, if you look at just last week for James Conner, it's going to be a little bit skewed, I think. It was an interesting week just looking at the usage for the Cardinals overall last week. Only 7 carries for James Conner last week. Not really involved in the passing game. He hasn't been. I guess he saw 5 targets last week. Damn. 19.4% route participation. But Ryan Heath tweeted out that starting the third quarter, James Conner missed the first drive of the third quarter. He had his ankle wrapped up, maybe knee, something, a wrap on. He was hurt coming in, and then he came in for the second drive and fumbled right away, and then didn't play the rest of the game. So his usage last game was really low, whereas Emari Demercado ended up playing a ton last week, saw 7 targets. But I think that was just a fluky situation where he was hurt. It was a blowout and he fumbled and they just said, screw it, you're just out for the game. I'm not reading anything into that as far as James Conner's usage going forward. It sounds like we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I don't think you really should read into that, especially with somebody like Conner, where he obviously is like an established veteran. I don't think that they're like, oh shit, he fumbled, like let's get rid of him kind of thing. And we actually even kind of in that game saw the Packers do the same thing. We had a really low market share for Josh Jacobs if you just looked at that, but it was the last 9 carries of the game for the Packers went to somebody else. So I think a lot of it had to do with the score and then also the things that you mentioned.
Yeah. On the season, 14 targets for James Conner. Fantasy Guru Drew pointed out on Twitter that Conner, that the Chargers defense has allowed, I forget what it was, maybe the most fantasy points to dump off passes, something like that. So he was betting the over on 11.5 receiving yards for James Conner. Seems like a good spot for receiving running backs against the Chargers. So that might be for people often come in and ask about props. I guess if you can get 11.5 receiving yards on James Conner, you can tail Drew on that one. Seems like a good bet. So you have the most of Conner. Let's just take a look at, all right. So again, last week, Conner lost a little bit of his role. Emari Demercado, we'll get to the kind of lower owned guys later. Derrick Henry, obviously the role has been just really solid for Derrick Henry in general. The one concern there is always game script stuff. I don't really know how to play that though. I struggle with so I know that Justice Hill comes in more when they need to pass. Clearly he is the passing down back, 20 targets on the year, 42% route participation, basically doubling the route participation of Henry, and Henry only has 7 targets on the year. So and if you look at trailing versus leading situations, it's just very clear that Derrick Henry is game script dependent, where he runs a ton if they are playing with the lead. But like, then do you want to play him with Lamar Jackson? Do you factor it in at all? Like, do you try to factor it in, or is that something you just kind of let the Sims work themselves out for you?
I mean, the Sims handle it like as
Yeah.
well as you really can, because like if you're using good ones, it has correlations built in. On a slate like this, I don't really care because there are
Yeah.
only the 2 games. On bigger slates, I generally I don't care about playing running backs and quarterbacks together. I think that's something that people tend to think is worse than it is. Henry and Lamar, though, in particular, I do actually think is problematic in general, not on a 2-game slate, but just because like, one, they're both expensive typically. And then 2, like you said, like Henry is so game script dependent, where if they're playing from behind, he's not going to be nearly as involved as you need him to be for that price. And if he's playing from ahead, then great. But then like Lamar's not throwing a lot. And at that price, when you're not catching passes, you need to be getting into the end zone. And if he's getting into the end zone, Lamar's not. So like, they specifically, I think, are guys that are on normal size slates very difficult to want to have together. On a 2-gamer, I don't mind it as much, obviously. I'm looking right now, of the 50 lineups I'd be playing if the slate had started when we did this show. In the lineups that have Lamar, I would have 23% Henry and 23% Justice Hill.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, Justice Hill theoretically, I think, correlates better with Lamar because he's more involved in the passing game. But then also, like, he comes in when they're playing from behind. So it's like, well, then Lamar probably hasn't done that much up until that point when he's coming in. So that's where it's like, it's sort of a struggle for me with the correlation. But I think I see it the same way as you do, where I wouldn't really want them together on a main slate. I don't really set a rule to not have Lamar and Derrick Henry on a main slate, but you probably could. Whereas here on a 2-game slate, I'm not really doing anything with it. Just kind of an interesting talking point, because he is one of like the most game script dependent running backs in the NFL. And also Lamar is more expensive. So harder for both game scripts to hit. I don't know. But yeah, on a 2-game slate, I think I have no issue with it. Touching on a couple questions, CW asked, does Call of Duty just releasing a new game make you nervous about Kyler? I didn't even realize they had released a new game. I'm not doing anything with it. Adam, are you?
Yeah, no, I didn't, but it has not been a good trend in the past.
It has been a long-standing bad trend, but yeah, I don't think I'm doing anything with it. And then Carlos asked, so this is the other trigger that we can pull in terms of getting different players against your defense. I think I'm going to allow infinite players against my defense. Anything different from you?
No, I mean, it's, we've talked about this on Showdown slates too. On your shorter slates, obviously having a player against your defense isn't good, or players, but for every guy that you add against your defense, it's also another way that you are limiting your dupes, because people aren't doing that. So it is, I think, a strength of using Sims tools as opposed to optimizers, is like, you don't have to make that decision. Just looking through my lineups, I do have some lineups where like I have 2 guys against my defense, but like on a 2-game slate, it just doesn't matter that much, because you have to play a defense. And so like, there's some times that every defense on the slate is going to suck, and the Cardinals defense wins out with 6 fantasy points, and the Chargers offense also did good. Like, stuff like that happens. Obviously, touchdowns are fluky. You can have a defense give up a lot of points, but they run back a kick and an interception, and they're still the defense you need. Also with, on full PPR sites like DraftKings, when you're talking receivers or pass catching running backs, like, your player can do well even without scoring touchdowns. So, yeah, I don't have any rules set. Just kind of scrolling through my lineups, I've already seen a couple that have like 2 guys against the defense. Here's one with like Dobbins and McConkey against the Cardinals. I think that's fine. Palmer, McConkey, I don't have a problem with that. So I haven't seen anything yet that has 3. But oh no, here's one with Dobbins, Kimani, and McConkey. Oh, that's the Bucs. Never mind. So yeah, I haven't seen any with 3.
Okay.
But
so
yeah,
I mean, that's a good note. So maybe set a rule for max 3, I think, would probably be a good rule, something like that. I generally allow on a 2-game slate, I generally allow for like the max, but I think that might make sense to limit it to like 3 or 4.
I take it back. I just found a Mayfield, Godwin, Evans Ravens team.
Okay. But that, okay, so still just 3. So quarterback plus 2 against the defense. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, there gets to a point where if you're doing like 4 pass catchers and quarterback with the opposing defense, it gets a little bit tough, just because it's like they're probably scoring 4 touchdowns and you're losing a lot of points there. But still, like you say, it pulls the lever of avoiding dupes. So like there's pros and cons to it. So yeah, typically not something that I limit on a 2-game slate. But if I were going to, like maybe 3 or 4 max against your
Yeah.
defense.
Yeah, I mean, like looking at that Baker team I just mentioned, I wouldn't want to just be running an entire set of lineups that are doing this because it's clearly bad, but it's also going to be offset by lower ownership, lower dupes. And it's not like it's crazy. Like the Ravens aren't expensive as a defense. And it's not like it's crazy to picture some game where Chris Godwin and Mike Evans catch a bunch of passes. They get in the end zone a couple times, but like the Ravens score a touchdown and they're the highest scoring defense. Like it's not
Yeah,
that far out of the realm of possibility.
no, not at all. All right, so we've talked about the main. There's like kind of like the big three: J.K. Dobbins, Derrick Henry, James Conner. Then it gets a lot murkier because we have the Tampa Bay situation with Rachaad White probably returning tonight. It'll be a lot easier if Rachaad White does not return, but he's questionable. I think indications are that Rachaad White probably returning tonight, and there's been some coach speak that kind of suggests it's going to be a three-headed monster. I mean, it very much suggests that. I don't know if you want to necessarily believe it, but that's at least what they're saying, is that it's going to be a three-headed monster. Also kind of a play the hot hand, whoever is doing the best for us. The quotes are like, they're all going to get carries early on, and then whoever is doing the best, we're going to stick with them. Here, I'll read one of them. So offensive coordinator Liam Cohen on the 18th said Sean Tucker stepped up in a critical moment and displayed a lot of things we had seen in practice, but a lot of things we haven't been able to see because of not being able to tackle. We saw flashes in OTAs and training camp and preseason. He's always engaged in meetings, eyes up, writes down everything you say. When his moment came, he took full advantage. It's a good problem to have. Really proud of him. We have to try to run the ball and remain balanced against the Ravens to keep us from being so one-sided against them. If you fall behind and get into drop back against them, it's not going to be a fun movie. Later on, they added on the running back room, all the guys are going to play. They're going to get reps. And at the end of the day, whoever's giving us the best opportunity to win throughout that game will probably get the majority of the carries. You got to get all three of them a series early on. At the end of the day, that's what it's going to have to be, is all three of those guys are going to get a series, and really kind of whoever is giving us the best opportunity will be able to ride that. So murky. It's one of those that's like, yeah, I'm not playing any of them in a small field GPP, or a field of 100, probably just avoiding the Bucs running back situation altogether. But in like the largest field GPP, it's sort of interesting. These murky situations. I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do with it. But looking at the ownership, we have Rachaad White coming in at 24.5%, Bucky Irving 13%, and then Sean Tucker down at sub 3%. So kind of interesting there. What are you doing with the Bucs running back situation?
Yeah, it's really messy. I'm getting to like 16% White right now, which my ownership projection on him is a little bit lower, but at like 11%. So I'm getting to 16% of him. I'm getting to like 2% Tucker, which out of 50 lineups obviously is only one. And then I don't have any Bucky Irving right now, which I don't love because like obviously he was carving out a real role even before White's injury, but I haven't projected for more ownership than the rest of the group right now. And I think that's kind of what forced him out. So if the ownership projections change between between now and lock, between I ran stuff and lock, I think Irving would pop up a little bit. But as far as like projecting the workload here, I think that, like you were saying, it's really volatile and there's a lot of ways that you could go. I think there's kind of two options. Like you either have to project it to be like a true 3-man like split in some way, not saying like 33% for everybody, but like right. Tucker has an actual role. Or you say, I don't believe the coach speak, Sean Tucker is not going to touch the ball. And you go back to what they were doing previously with Irving and White, in which case then they both do look pretty good, even though they're going to cut into each other's workload. But the approach that I took was, because Tucker played so well and the coach speak, factoring him in for the least volume of the three, but still a big enough role where as a group, it made them not look that good, especially at their respective ownership. I do think that whichever of White or Irving ends up being projected for less ownership, I will play them probably at a rate a little bit higher than the field. That's what's happening for me right now. But whichever one ends up being popular, I don't know that I even play them.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page largely. I mean, I might play a little bit. Like none of them are projected to be popular, so I guess that's right. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think anybody's going to get to like 40% ownership from the group. So all of them are like, yeah, kind of lower owned. You can make a case for them. I do think that I'll probably force at least a share or two of Sean Tucker just because of the really low ownership. You said you're getting to 1 in 50 lineups. I think that sounds about right to me. I'll probably get to similar of Sean Tucker. just because it is like he was so good the last game. All the coach speak really positive on Tucker. And it sounds like they're going to give him an opportunity. So, if he's going to be the lowest owned, and they say it's going to be hot hand, whoever does the best with their series early on, I don't know if you want to believe them. Like, who knows? But he was so good last game. I think it makes sense to believe them and just say, well, what if he does like get an opportunity early on, and what if he's good with that opportunity at this low of ownership on a 2-game slate? You could really set yourself apart, especially since he is $5,000. So I do think that Sean Tucker is pretty interesting, a player that I'm definitely going to be. I might have a couple shares too, a few shares, try to get to 5-10% at least.
One other thing with the situation that is difficult outside of just projecting it in general, no matter what tools you're using, whether it's like an optimizer, sim, whatever, it is difficult. And we see this in basketball a lot. It's difficult to handle the if he plays well, he plays more situation.
Yeah.
But it is appealing because this is like when you're projecting this, I do think you have to project all three guys. But like you said, there's a real possibility that if one of these guys just goes out there and runs the ball well, they get all of the, not all, but most of the touches going forward. So there is kind of that. I think you could potentially make the case for like, not that you want to say you have to have a Tampa Bay running back in each lineup or anything, but trying to figure out some way to account for like just a bigger standard deviation on them than they would typically have.
Yeah. I pulled this up because this is the one reason that I'm not like super enthused about it. It is a bottom 4 matchup for running backs. Baltimore allowing the 4th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, which does that I believe it. Like I think they are a good running defense. So that does make it pretty tough for me. That's the one reason that I can't really get enthusiastic about it. If it was like the same situation and they were playing just a middling defense, or if they were playing like the Panthers or something, I'd be all in. But it makes it tougher against Baltimore. But I still think just because of the low ownership, just hope that Sean Tucker gets in there for a touchdown, has a couple catches. I don't know. Like you can certainly see a way that Sean Tucker pays off and at very little ownership. So I think it's interesting, but not
the
like
other issue
a
here is
slam
that
dunk.
they're not that cheap.
I know even Sean Tucker is 5,000. Bucky Irving's 5,900. Rashad White 5,700. Yeah, 100%.
And like you compare that, Connor's 6,600, Dobbins is 6,400. It's not like you're getting a massive discount for the risk that you're taking on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we've said enough about them. I think that they are interesting, playable. I wouldn't play again Sean Tucker in like the small field contest, but if you're playing one of the large field GPPs, maybe take a shot there. I think it's worth it at 5,000 in a lineup or two. Get above the field. I think that this is a pretty good number for a really volatile situation. This is one of those, like we talk about input volatility. Like there's a lot of input volatility here. Nobody really knows. Even the coaches don't seem to know how this game is going to go. So a lot of input volatility. And from what I've seen around the industry, nobody's really projecting Sean Tucker to have much of a role at all. So he's probably not going to get a ton of ownership. So
I'm trying to think like how I actually want to handle it. I think I might do something. I don't know how this will work out. It's not something I've tried before, but like adding a point or two to all three of their median projections and then setting a rule so that I only get one of them.
Yeah.
Because like obviously if you just bump their projection, you're just gonna start getting them together. But like to just try and account for the whole factor of like we don't know how it's going to break down at the beginning, but we know whoever does well is going to get more at the end. I think I might take that approach, and that would probably allow me to like just get more of the backfield in general. And or even if I don't, because it's like I don't want to just like make the arbitrary decision that I am going to play them more, but it'll at least put me in a position where my process is handling them closer to correct, I think, as far from like an upside standpoint. Because with it being such an unusual situation, there's kind of no way that tools are handling their distribution correctly, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. Just I want to check out Sean Tucker's usage in the passing game, because that obviously is a big factor, particularly in a tough matchup for me, where it's just like, can he rack up PPR points? 3 targets last week on 25% route participation. So he could see some targets. I don't know. It feels like they're going to go back to Rashad White more in the passing game is what I would expect. But you never know. Maybe I'll have some opportunity in the passing game as well. Not a slam dunk, but I think that approach sounds good. Just try to get, make sure you have some of each of them, assuming that none get super chalky. All right. So we've talked about the big 3 from from the Chargers, the Ravens, and the Cardinals. And we talked about the Tampa Bay situation overall. What about anybody else? So we have Justice Hill. Obviously, we talked about how game script dependent Derrick Henry is. Justice Hill, obviously, the other side of that, could be very involved in the passing game if in the right game script. Kamani Vidal is only 4,400. Some positive coach speak there about how they can trust him going forward. He had that awesome catch for a touchdown with Justin Herbert. The coach speak this week was pretty positive on Kamani Vidal. Like we could use him more going forward. We trust him now, essentially, was what the coach speak was over the course of the week. So he's sort of interesting. Amari DiMercado, we sort of talked about it already when we were talking about James Conner. And neither of us, I think, is really buying into it, but it was at least interesting that he had 7 targets last week on 52.8% route participation. So he was running a ton of routes, saw 7 targets. And it's not like he's been a complete zero throughout the year. So some sort of interesting other options here at really low ownership. None that stand out to me as like amazing plays, but kind of the low owned dart throw kind of variety. Do you have any real interest in anybody outside of the big 3 and then the Tampa Bay situation? Any other running backs that you have interest in?
Hill's my preferred one of these low owned guys. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. Like, one, he does have that clear passing game role carved out, which we know is just valuable in PPR. Tampa Bay this season, 5th best schedule adjusted receiving bump for running backs. So like, that's nice. But then also, we already mentioned, like, I'm under the field on Derrick Henry. I'm under the field on Lamar. And Lamar does obviously correlate with Justice Hill to some extent, but may as well go to like the low owned guy on the Ravens that would benefit if the Ravens either are not scoring a lot of points or have scored a lot of points but are playing from behind. So from like a portfolio standpoint, I think that makes sense, but also just as an individual play, I think it makes sense. So like, he's showing up like 14% of the time for me right now, projected for like 7% ownership. So I think he looks pretty good. I don't have any issue with Vidal. I think that that's a projection that I might end up a little bit higher on him by the time we get to lock than I was coming into the show, just because I kind of went back and looked through what I had. And I think I think my projection on him is fine, but if anything, it probably skews a little bit low. So I could see getting more of him, especially because he does negatively correlate with Dobbins, who's really popular. And like I said, I'm getting a lot of Dobbins, but not as much as the field. So I think he makes some sense. But Justice Hill is the one that stands out to me the most right now. And also, I didn't catch if you touched on it, but Clint F said, wouldn't it be sharp to be overweight on the Bucs running back that you think is going to get the most passing game work? Yes. And that's probably Rachaad White. And that is the one that I have the most of now. And I am over the field according to the ownership projections I used. So like, the answer is yes, but it's still, Bucky Irving can be the pass catching back. So there is still volatility there.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it would seem like probably Rachaad White. He's had that passing game role, so you'd kind of anticipate that. The quote that I saw on, so this is the post game presser on Kamani Vidal. Jim Harbaugh said that was an amazing catch by Kamani Vidal. That was a great throw by Justin Herbert and a great catch by Kamani. I love the way he finished it off in the end zone. We're going to be able to trust him a lot more now. He continues to be able to protect the ball, make the play, and then protection. So, some positive coach speak. Who knows? I mean, that was his first NFL game. So it could be like, all right, we saw him. He was good. Let's give him a lot more run. Or it could be just, J.K. Dobbins has been awesome. So why would we give this guy much more run? And that was also a game where J.K. Dobbins had 25 carries and was really involved in the game. So there was just a big pie in that game. And Kamani Vidal, relative to J.K. Dobbins, had a pretty small portion of that pie. So really hard to know if his role is going to expand here. If the pie is smaller, then he might just have very little role. But he's at least intriguing to me. What do you think of the idea? And again, I apologize, Shrek, if you're listening and you did not want me to share this. I assumed you wanted me to share it because you texted me before my show. But the idea of playing Kamani Vidal with J.K. Dobbins in the same lineup, what do you think about that idea?
I think it's fine. Like, it's a 2-game slate. That's not like the group of running backs that I would love to do it with, because Dobbins doesn't give you a ton of pass catching upside. So like, you need Dobbins to be getting into the end zone. You need him to be getting a big rushing workload. And then you also still need Vidal to somehow be doing something. But I think it's fine. I think the only Vidal lineup I have has both of them. And like, he is so cheap and could just get there off of, a catch or two where he gets in the end zone once. Dobbins goes for 100 and a touchdown. They're both good. Like, neither guy is very expensive. So that helps out there also. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like it. I think it's interesting just for, and it kind of depends on the wide receiver situation too. So that was part of his point, was all the wide receivers are banged up. We have several wide receivers who are questionable right now. I'm assuming Ladd McConkey is playing at the very least. I think Simi Fehoko is playing, so we might have some viable wide receivers. But if they're all out, then maybe they do just lean even more into the run. I don't know. It's at least an interesting idea. They're both pretty inexpensive, or at least Kamani Vidal is pretty expensive. I guess J.K. Dobbins is not really for the slate, but I think it's viable. That's funny. R. Stanley, the horny toad bar. Yeah, that's a good one. All right. And so I think DeMarcado, the one thing I would say is I think he's the best min priced option. So like I'm not buying into the 7 targets from last week. But again, he has had some role throughout the year. Maybe James Conner is really dealing with something. The coaches did this week. They said, we fully believe in James Conner. We're not worried about him, whatever. So the coach speak seems to suggest what we all would assume, that James Conner going to be the bell cow, or at least the lead running back going forward still. But DeMarcado, again, 7 targets last week. He's had some role throughout the year, 11 targets on the season. I don't know. So I guess just 4 prior to last week. So I think it's viable as the min priced option. You can kind of make a case for maybe here in a bigger role, but I don't know. What do you think? Are you going to get to any DeMarcado?
I don't have any. No.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to wide. Or do you have any other running backs you want to talk about?
No.
All right. We'll move on. Talk about some wide receivers. Let's start at the top. So in terms of projection, you have Chris Godwin at the top. Godwin and Evans. So Godwin's coming in at 50% ownership. Mike Evans coming in at 39.5% ownership. Again, the Ravens have given up the most yards through the air in the entire NFL. So it seems like it's a pretty good spot for the Bucs. Second best in terms of schedule adjusted matchup. The slot, they're allowing 4.8 over expected fantasy points, out wide 6.9 over expected. Just a good spot all around for Bucs receivers. So starting with, or if you want to, let's talk about the whole team, just the Bucs in general. How do you feel about Godwin, Evans? How much Sterling Shepard are you getting to? Any other Bucs receivers?
Yeah, so Evans and Godwin are my 2 highest owned receivers overall. I do have more Evans than Godwin right now, 50% Godwin, 58% Evans. I'm fine with that. Godwin obviously looks good. You said you have him projected for 50% ownership. I have it a little bit higher, but still getting a lot of him. I like Evans here just because he is getting less ownership, and we know the touchdown upside that he offers. Baltimore, from a man zone standpoint this year, middle of the pack in terms of man coverage percentage, but top 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed per dropback in man coverage. We know that's a tough matchup, or it's tough to defend Evans in man coverage. So I like the spot for him. I like that he is getting like half the ownership of Godwin, or in your case, like 80%, but still. So I do like both of them a lot. I am just getting to Evans a little bit more. And then I'm getting to like 16% Sterling Shepard. I think that he's just a cheap way that you can differentiate. He's clearly been the 3rd receiver in terms of opportunities, in terms of route running for Tampa Bay. So I don't have him projected for much ownership right now, but he is really cheap, and I am quite a bit over the field.
Yep, same. What do you have Sterling Shepard's ownership projected at?
Like 5.
It's where everywhere. I don't totally believe it. I kind of think he's going to come in a little bit higher owned. I still do like it. I saw somebody earlier saying that the coach speak is negative for Sterling Shepard. I did think it was like sort of open to interpretation. I interpreted it as mostly positive coach speak for Sterling Shepard. But let me just read some of the stuff. And this is from the Coach Speak Index Discord. So if any of you, you should check it out if you haven't already done so. It's only like $5 a month. Really good stuff. But on the 17th, head coach Todd Bowles said, Sterling Shepard has been very energetic. He's been a spark plug. I don't expect my wideout to get 3 penalties, but other than that, he's been a great addition for us and a very positive spark plug for us. They talked about him again later on the 18th. Head offense coordinator Liam Cohen said, we need the 3rd receiver, the Z receiver, to emerge and come in and execute. I love Sterling Shepard. A couple of those things were a little iffy last game, but I love his energy in the huddle, locker room, pregame, sidelines. But we do need some more production out of that position. We also need to trust that position in order to throw them the ball. So it's sort of mixed. Both of them bringing up that he made some mistakes in the last game. They talk about loving his energy. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that coach speak. But at low ownership, I'm just going to lean into it anyway.
Yeah, I do think so. My biggest takeaway there, I think, is that, because I agree you could spin that either way. Like if he comes out and has a big game, you can just go on Twitter and be like, yeah, they were just motivating him. And then if he barely plays, it's like, oh, it was obvious that
he made mistakes. Yeah,
right, exactly. So like you can see that go either way. I do think it's interesting that like McMillan's not going to get any ownership, and he is pretty clearly the guy that you would expect to step in, I think, if they do change the role. Like he had missed time. He came back last week, only ran routes on 13% of dropbacks, but it was his job early in the season. And so, he's 3,500. He's not going to get any ownership. Tampa Bay is just a really interesting team on this slate where I think you kind of make the case too, just like I was saying with the running backs, like not to artificially bump like Shepard's projection, but maybe artificially bump McMillan a little bit in whatever you run, and then just make sure you don't have him with Shepard. Because if you just go with a medium projection, it's not accounting for all of the input volatility between these two. And in your large field tournaments on a 2-game slate where it is difficult to differentiate, I really want to at least be giving myself the option to get to, a unknown Jalen McMillan and just hope that he jumps back to his beginning of the season role.
Would you set any rules for the two of them?
Yeah, like I don't want them together. I don't really know how that works. Because and the reason that I would say I would set that rule, the same reason for the Tampa Bay running backs, is that if I just use their median projection, I'm never going to get them together. In the example that I was giving, I am artificially bumping McMillan so that he shows up for me because I'm trying to account for what if he is ahead of Shepard today, in which case like Shepard's projection would be lower, and I'm not lowering Shepard's, so like I just don't want them together.
Yeah, like on a showdown slate, I maybe wouldn't set that rule because they can both get there. But like on a 2-game slate, it's like it's less likely that both of them put up 10 plus fantasy points. And do you really want two receivers that both have 4 receptions? One, I don't know. Just I think that makes sense.
For me, the rules come in. I don't set rules on small slates or ever that block out guys that are being projected their normal way because it's accounting for that. But I will set rules if I'm saying like, okay, well, there is a chance here that's being unaccounted for that McMillan plays more, because I know that if McMillan plays more, Shepard's playing less. And so like the perfect way you would have to do it is when McMillan plays more, you would need to put in a big negative correlation between McMillan and Shepard. I'm using publicly available tools. They don't give me access to their back end to go do that. So I'm going to set a rule to make sure that they don't get together.
Yep. I think that makes sense. A lot of people asking questions. Any news on Trey Palmer? Is McMillan out? We should know in about a minute. We're going to get inactives for this game. So we will update you once we get inactives in a minute for the Bucs and Ravens game. But yeah, I'm really into, so I want to, I'm very much with you. Obviously, I'm playing a lot of Baker Mayfield. Part of the reason is all the different variations you can do with the Bucs. So I'm going to have a lot of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. I'm also definitely going to be overweight to the field on Sterling Shepard. If we have both Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan active, it becomes a little bit dicier. So maybe I would be less inclined to just like absolutely jam them into lineups. Have they been, let's see, looking at week 6, McMillan ran 5 routes in week 6. I think that was had he missed week 5, if I'm remembering correctly?
He missed 4 and 5. The only week this season that all of Shepard, Palmer, and McMillan have been active, McMillan ran 77.5% route participation. Palmer was 22.5%. Shepard was 7.5%. But that was also Shepard's first game of the season.
Okay, so it is a little bit murky, and the coach speak is also pretty murky there. So it is. I think it makes sense to set a rule. Do you think you're going to get to any Trey Palmer, assuming he's active?
Probably not. I have the hardest time moving him to the front of that list because he's the only one that we haven't seen ever be that guy this year. Like every game he's played, he's been behind somebody. He was behind McMillan week 1 and 2. He was behind McMillan week 1, 2, and 3, and then he was behind Shepard week 4. So, could he be that guy? Sure. But, you have limited number of lineups. I'm already talking about, assuming they're both in, making sure that I try and get to at least a little bit of McMillan. I'm not just making my whole day be like roulette between Shepard, McMillan, and Palmer because there's a decent chance that they all end up sucking.
We did just got inactives. Looks like Payne Durham, the tight end, is inactive. No real relevant players. Nobody I was planning on playing. So Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan are apparently active. They're at least not showing up on the inactives report. I don't think did Palmer need to be called up or anything? Like, is he on the practice squad? I'm assuming that this means that they are both active for the game. I might need to double check that just to make sure that they are actually active. But yeah, Rachaad White is active for the game. So it's just a mess. Tampa Bay is just a mess overall outside of the obvious plays. But I'm going to have the most of the wide receiver threes. I will still have the most of Sterling Shepard, but I think McMillan, I think that makes a lot of sense too. Like there is a possibility that he does come in and retake that role. They said they need to invigorate that role. They kind of said there was also some coach speak about McMillan this week. And actually, maybe let me just pull that up real quick because I already have it open here. Let me just find it. Okay, yeah, they had said Trey Palmer is trending towards returning, still has to pass some tests. I assume this means he's active since he's not inactive or on the inactives list. He said, when you miss a couple of weeks, so this is on the 17th, Todd Bowles said, when you miss a couple of weeks as a rookie, that's like a lifetime. So Jalen McMillan has to get caught back up to speed mentally and he'll be fine. So that was his quote on the 17th. So it is a pretty murky situation.
Right. And that goes back to, like, it shouldn't surprise. McMillan clearly had this role at the beginning of the season. So, like, granted, Shepard was out for the first two games and then, easing his way back in the third game. But we don't really know who their preferred guy is.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty good chance, especially based on, remember how good McMillan was in the preseason and all the hype he had coming in.
I remember.
This could very easily be his role. And it's just a matter of, when is he ready to go, which is this week or next week or the week after. I don't know.
Yeah. So it is murky. Maybe he just takes on, maybe he gradually gets more of that role. But I'm still thinking that we're going to have enough of a role for Sterling Shepard. It does make it murkier. So I want to acknowledge that the situation is different because we didn't have Jalen McMillan there a couple weeks ago, and then he played limited last week. So it is, who knows? Maybe he does take on a bigger role, but I think the coach speak, I would say, was mostly positive for Sterling Shepard. So at 5%, I'll probably lean in. I'll probably be honestly above weight to both of them. Kind of sounds like you will be also, based on current ownership projections at least. Yeah.
Probably, especially because, like, I'm just looking at my exposures overall, and, like, we haven't talked about them, but right now I have 20% Aguilar, 16% Shepard. I don't need that much Aguilar, and I don't need that much Shepard. Like, I can very easily be over the field on all three of those guys, while including McMillan.
Yeah. All right. I think we've spent enough time on the Tampa Bay receiver. I think they're the most interesting because we have such a murky situation everywhere in Tampa Bay. But let's talk briefly about the Ravens. So obviously you have Zay Flowers there, Rashad Bateman. I don't know if you want to go to anybody else on Nelson Aguilar or something. What's your level of interest in Ravens? We have Zay Flowers coming in at 45% ownership, Rashad Bateman 25.5%. What are you doing with the Ravens receivers?
Yeah, I'm right around the field on Flowers. I have like 44% of him. I think he looks good. 6,700, perfectly fine price tag. Don't have any real thoughts there. 97% route participation last week, season high for him. So, that's good to see. But obviously, he's just been the number one receiver all year long. Aguilar, 40% route participation last week, pretty much in line with what he's been doing all season. At 3,300 and very low ownership, I'm getting to him just because he is so low owned. It's not like I think this is, an Aguilar game or anything.
What are you projecting his ownership for?
Like sub 5%.
Okay. RotoGrinders has him at 15.5%. So that was where I was like, that's too high for me. Like I would probably just fade at that, but 5%. Yeah, that seems interesting.
Yeah. The truth's probably somewhere in the middle. I think it's similar with Shepard. Whenever I do get like this low owned guy is a really good play at that ownership, it usually means the ownership is just higher. But from a value standpoint, I think he's fine. I think he's similar to, Shepard or McMillan. Other than that, I'm not getting a ton. I'm not too far off the field on Bateman. I have like 12%.
Yep. I searched Trey Palmer and I saw I woke up pissed off like a MF. I remember that was a thing. Like every time I post that, he scores a touchdown. But this is from January. I don't think he posted it today. So that just a note there on Trey Palmer. Okay, Deeg says ETR has Aguilar at 1.8%. Okay, so some wide disparity here in ownership on Aguilar. I think it's probably going to be on the lower end. I would guess sub 10% at least. I think you're probably right. It probably splits the difference there. We don't have that many great options. But yeah, Bateman, I think looks fine at ownership. He has, been targeted a fair amount this year, running a lot of routes. Zay Flowers looks good. Don't need to spend a lot more time there. I think it's just, Zay Flowers looks really good. Bateman is a kind of boom bust option who's getting some ownership. He probably should. He's one of the better value options. Looks solid there. Not taking any major stand there. What about the Chargers receivers? So we don't have those inactives yet. We're not going to get them while Adam is on the show. I might still be going when we get that news, but Ladd McConkey questionable, but expected to play. What are you doing with Ladd McConkey?
I have like 36%, so I think that's quite a bit less than the field. I think he looks fine, but it probably also just has to do with the lineups I'm playing in general. If I don't have any Herbert, obviously I'm probably not jamming in his receivers. So I think he's a good play. Obviously, he's having a good rookie season. He's the Chargers receiver I would get to first, but I'm under the field on him. I'm under the field on Josh Palmer, getting like 12%. Feheko, I'm getting like 8% as a value guy. So, I'm getting to them because it's a 2-game slate, but not to the same level that I am guys from other teams.
Yeah, McConkey looks pretty good, pretty strong target share. We can just look at, I guess, for the season, because we've had Palmer out a fair amount of games or limited, so it's a little bit tough to read everything. But generally, McConkey he leads the team in route participation, in targets, but still just 31 targets. So he's getting targeted about 6 times per game. It's just an offense that doesn't pass that much. They have one of the highest run rates in the league, so they're just not passing all that much. The volume is not great. But McConkey seems to be the favorite receiver there pretty clearly. And now we do have Quentin Johnson is doubtful, like almost certainly going to miss the game. Simi Fehoko questionable, Ladd McConkey questionable. It's a tough situation to talk about right now because of all of the questionables. We also DJ Chark, I believe, is not up. I think they needed to, from what I've gathered, they needed to activate him in order to play DJ Chark earlier. So I don't think he's playing. I might need to double check that. But the inactive situation might change things a little bit, but for me, it's mostly going to be Ladd McConkey. I'll have a little bit of Josh Palmer, but again, I think last week he had like 50% route participation, which I did not love to see that for Josh Palmer. Would have had more interest. Let's see. 52.6% route participation, 2 targets last week for Josh Palmer. So just not that great of usage. So yeah, I think it seems reasonable to be kind of light there.
Yeah, so I do need to walk back something I said. I forgot that I'm looking at the SaberSim screen and I had wide receiver pulled up. I have like 76% McConkey right now. So
oh, damn. Okay.
Not under the field. Getting a lot of him. He is cheap. I'll say I was surprised because looking through my lineups, I saw him a ton and it seemed like more than 36%. It wasn't counting the times that he's in flex. So overall, I am a little bit overweight on him. Like I had said before that I guess I wasn't going to be surprised since I don't have Herbert, but like he's also somebody where he is so cheap and he can just get there off of receptions. Like he's, not running a ton of deep home run type routes. Herbert doesn't have to have a good game at all for McConkey to get there. So I think he is a good play, like I said before, and I am actually getting them.
Okay. Yeah, that is good to hear, because I was anticipating, like, he's just one of the better value plays on the slate. You don't have that many like great value plays, so he just like really opens things up. His salary, he's going to get ownership, but maybe not enough.
Yeah, like I said, I was really surprised. I was surprised when I saw the number because I was just like, I feel like every lineup I've looked at has him.
You say you're light on Josh Palmer, 21%. Are you lighter than that?
I'm double checking that now because I did say that, but same issue. So I have 14% Palmer. So he didn't.
Okay.
I don't have a ton of Palmer in the flex. I do have a lot of McConkey in the flex.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and it's not really great for anybody else. Darius Davis also questionable, I think. So we'll have to see inactives there to see if anybody else pops out. Is pretty interesting, but as of right now, not a ton of interest in anybody outside of Ladd McConkey. And
all that I'm hearing from
Josh
this Chargers wide receiver room is that I am not going somewhere to watch the Ravens games tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be gross. Probably not the most fun game. Wait. Oh, you mean because you have to stick around and make adjustments?
You have to find out who's playing for the Chargers. Yeah.
But you could catch most of it because it's only a 45-minute delay. That's It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be out before the Ravens game.
Yeah. All right. And then, so outside of, we've talked about the Bucs, the Ravens, the Chargers, any interest in Cardinals receivers. So you have Marvin Harrison Jr. projecting for 21% ownership at 7,000. Michael Wilson projecting for 25% at 4,700. Greg Dortch, 10% ownership at 4,100. Any interest in any of these, or I guess to what extent, or Zay Jones and any Cardinals receivers that you're getting?
I'm right around the field on all the 3 of the main guys. I don't have any Zay Jones right now, but 38% Harrison, 18% Michael Wilson, 16% Greg Dortch. So I am a little bit over on Dortch at 4,100, which, as a value receiver, I think is fine. But Arizona wide receivers, I'm, again, pretty much around the field, which I'm a little surprised that I'm not more overweight just because I'm getting a lot of Kyler. But also, I think that it makes sense when you do have, if I am prioritizing McConkey still because of the price, and I am prioritizing the Tampa receivers because they're Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, then, it does kind of create a situation where outside of Kyler stacks, I probably just am not really playing the Cards receivers as much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Michael Wilson, I just don't think it's a great spot for him. Not Michael Wilson, but Marvin Harrison. I don't feel like it is the best spot in the world. I don't know. I can't get that enthusiastic about any of these Cardinals receivers. The price tag makes them sort of viable to me. Dortch at 4,100, 26 targets on the year. Michael Wilson leads the team in route participation with 84%, 30 targets on the year. But I just, the price tag, I wish if Marvin Harrison Jr. was $1,000 cheaper, I'd have a lot more interest, but really, really tough price tag there. I'm sure I think I'm with you. I think I'll probably be close to the field. It's not like a huge priority for me, but it scares me a little bit because we know he can have a big game. So
I think the way that I'm handling it makes a lot of sense because like if Arizona just has a good game, like they're not super popular and, obviously they have talent with Kyler, Harrison, etc. You can get to them, at low ownership, make good lineups, but you can kind of just like keep them together. And I think that's basically what's happening for me is like in lineups where I don't have Kyler, it's just like, okay, well, there's other receiving plays that I like more than Harrison. So I'm just not playing Harrison in this lineup either. 75% of my Kyler lineups have Harrison. I have 19 total lineups that have Marvin Harrison Jr. 15 of them have Kyler. So Arizona for me, I'm over the field overall on the stack, but it's kind of just very like keeping outside of James Conner, keeping like the Arizona guys together.
I'm with you. People were asking about Zay Jones. I don't think he's going to have much of a role this week. Some of the coach speak on the 11th, Jonathan Gannon said, and this was before last week's game, but he said, Zay Jones looked good in practice. We're going to be smart with him. He's not going to go this week, but he's trending in the right direction. So he's active, but I don't really think that he's going to be like, I don't think he's going to be a starting receiver anyway. He could be, but I don't think even if he is, he's going to be this week. So I don't think he's going to have enough usage for me to really have any interest in Zay Jones. Don't think I get there. I also know I don't think Ricard is playable.
As far as Zay Jones goes, I don't have him. I think the biggest concern is like Michael Wilson's probably the guy that starts to lose some routes potentially, if anybody does.
Yeah, certainly possible. You meant for Showdown, Ricard. I guess I'll take a look at it when we get to Showdown after Adam leaves, because we are over an hour already. So I want to let Adam out of here pretty soon. Xavier Weaver, I mean, I don't think I'm going there, but what was notable that Xavier Weaver came in and played a ton last week with Marvin Harrison out. I was sort of shocked by that. 69% route participation, but with Marvin Harrison returning, I don't think that's playable. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
I mean,
I was outside of like looking at stats, I'm completely unaware of anything that happened last week. So,
yeah.
So
all right. Fair. All right. Let's move on to tight ends. Move this down here. Reminder, if you have not already, please subscribe to both of our YouTube channels. We are trying to grow both of our channels, Adam and I, Adam being the Endgame Syndicate channel. That's in the description of the video. If you're at the Flannelverse, make sure you click that link, subscribe over there if you haven't already done so. And you can, of course, also find Adam's Dub Club link in the description of this video, where Adam posts stuff with NBA season coming up. I mean, it's kind of a must for me. You need to sign up for Adam's Dub Club. Anything else?
I'm not doing NBA Dub Club.
Oh, you're not doing any NBA. Okay, all right, because it's just too much work.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I take it back. Don't sign up for any of Adam's stuff. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, make sure you signed up for his NFL Dub Club at least. Anything else, Adam, that people should look for?
Endgame Dub Club. I'll be doing some NBA shows on the Endgame YouTube channel. I haven't decided for sure if I'm doing it 5 days a week or not, or if I'm just going to do like the Monday, Wednesday, Friday bigger slates. But definitely going to be doing that tournament show that I was doing for baseball for NBA.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, the link is in the description of this video. Sign up if you haven't already done so. Tight ends, Adam, it all starts with Trey McBride is 5,600, projects the best by 3.5 fantasy points here at Roto Grinders, also getting 31% ownership. What are you doing with Trey McBride?
Wrong screen.
I'll look up schedule adjusted stuff while you're doing that.
Yeah.
Slightly positive matchup.
Right around the field. I have 36%. Field's projected around 40.
I will say we just did the Arizona wide receiver stuff, and now we're talking about the tight end. So I do want to mention again, yes, Joey Bosa is out for this game. That does make things a little bit easier for the Arizona offense. So some of the schedule adjusted stuff to me is not as applicable with Joey. Like, it clearly is going to affect things a little bit. Adam is an NBA genius, R. Stanley says. I mean, it's too bad. Too bad he's not doing a dub club, because man.
Gotta keep all that stuff in my head.
Yeah. So what are you getting to with Trey McBride?
Right around the field, like 36%, having projected around 40.
Okay. Yep.
So seems basically the same as the other Arizona guys, like probably kept with the stack a lot, but probably not as much as like Harrison, because you just have weaker tight end options, in general. I have 18 total McBride lineups, and 10 of them have Kyler. So I do have more McBride one-offs than like Harrison one-offs.
McBride leads the team in targets, even though he missed a game. He has 38 targets on the year in 5 games, 80.6% route participation, is second on the team. Just really elite usage for a tight end. Should be easier with no Joey Bosa there. So yeah, I like Trey McBride. I think I'm right with you there. Outside of Trey McBride, it's kind of a big step down in terms of tight ends. You've got Cade Otton. I guess what are you doing with Cade Otton? I mean, again, I'm playing a lot of Baker Mayfield, so I imagine I'm going to get to a lot of Cade Otton. He's only 3,600. He's been targeted like 5 times per game this year, along with all of the elite usage. So things look pretty good for Cade Otton to me. Are you getting much there?
He's my second highest owned tight end, just behind McBride at 32%.
Yeah, last week 5 targets, 82.5% route participation. Looks good. I wrote in my article, Adam, it's weird with Mark Andrews. Like the usage for Mark Andrews has been so strange this year in general, but if you can kind of split it up into 3 different pieces. So weeks 1 and 2, Mark Andrews, 68.9% route participation, saw 7 targets. Not great for 2 weeks, 7 targets, 69% route participation, not like ideal. But then weeks 3 and 4 dropped down to 2 targets total across weeks 3 and 4 on 26.3% route participation. Those of us who drafted in best ball, panicked on Mark Andrews. Weeks 5 and 6 came up a little bit. The past couple weeks, 9 targets on 50.6% route participation. It is really a messy situation there with Mark Andrews. Good to see, that the coach has been kind of consistently like, he'll have his games, like he's going to be used in some packages. It's good to know. We know that we have that weapon always. Yeah, Charles says he did get into a car accident in the preseason, so maybe that affects things somewhat. I don't know. It's a tough situation to read. Are you getting to any Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I'm actually over the field by a little bit on both Andrews and Likely. Not together, I assume, but like we have seen them collectively just run more routes the last couple of weeks. 50% route participation last week for Likely, 53% for Andrews, 49% for Andrews in week 5, 66 for Likely. So we have seen just more, 2 tight end stuff there, which individually is obviously good for both of them. They're both cheap. Neither one is super popular. So I think this is a situation that you can kind of capitalize on where you don't have quite the same level of input volatility that you do with like the stuff we talked about in Tampa Bay, but from a medium projection standpoint, they both look fine, but not great. But in any given game, like the upside's still high for them. So I think it's a spot where you can kind of take advantage of, the field preferring guys like Otton and obviously McBride because they have less uncertainty about their role. But you're getting, around 15% ownership projected for Andrews, around 10% or so for Likely. I'm a little bit over the field on both of those guys, 20% Andrews, 14% Likely.
Yeah, that seems good to me. Likely I just pulled up here because I thought this was interesting. Week 1, we all remember he had 12 targets in that game. Everybody's panicking. Why didn't I draft Isaiah Likely? He has no more than 4 targets in any game since then. Last week he had 4 targets. That was his most since then, so just hasn't been used as much. But like you say, could spike at any week. That kind of feels like, on a 2-game slate, not getting much ownership. Both seem reasonable to be a little bit above weight to the field there. I like that take. Fantasy Guru Drew asks, he's a moderator on this channel, says he's a long-time listener, first-time caller, getting lots of 2 tight end builds. Are we okay with that? I would say yes. Can you see how much you're getting of 2 tight end builds?
16% of my lineups.
Okay, so yeah, seems pretty fine. Some of the better value at tight end, and you have Trey McBride, who's just a good play in general.
I disagree. I just want to. Deegs in chat said Likely pretty much operates as wide receiver 2 over Bateman and Aguilar. No, he doesn't. Likely has not run more routes than Bateman in a single game this year. He's drawn more targets than him in 2 out of 6 games. Likely does have a high ceiling. Like, I agree with your second point, but he does not operate as the wide receiver 2 here.
Yeah, agreed. And then spurious news. I mean, not the first person I'm hearing say this. Will Dissly is a lock. So we have Hayden Hurst out today. Will Dissly, last week we saw come in and had a little bit of, he was the biggest beneficiary of Hayden Hurst being limited. I think he left the game early last week, as I'm recalling. Yeah, he only ran 4 routes, 10% route participation. And then Will Dissly came in, ran 50% of routes, saw 5 targets in that game. You still have Stone Smart there, Eric Tomlinson. So it's not like he had the entire tight end role to himself, but pretty strong role there for Will Dissly. If you look at like here, I'm just going to pull up the main slate here. I might need to refresh this. I believe he has the second highest projection of any tight end on the slate at fantasy points. I want to double check this. Actually, I guess I can just look at Roto Grinders projections. They don't have him. They only have him at 5.5, so they have him pretty low in terms of projection. Let me double check this. How much Will Dissly are you getting to?
I'm around half the field. I have him projected for about 30% ownership. I'm getting to, I just lost him. I was around half the field, and I think that makes sense for me. I think he's a good point per dollar play. I have 14%. I think he's a good point per dollar play at 2,800, but he is still a tight end. It's still, just a volatile position in general. You're just gonna have a lot of people paying down to him because it makes sense from a point per dollar standpoint. The range of outcomes is not any different than the Ravens guys, for example. So I think basically what I ended up doing is, I mentioned a minute ago that I'm over the field on Likely, I'm over the field on Andrews. I think I'm probably pretty close to the field collectively between Dissly, Andrews, and Likely. It's just that I cut some Dissly to get to more Andrews and Likely, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I will say I believe that they had the projection higher on Will Dissly earlier when I was writing my article, so it stood out to me. I was like, damn, why is Will Dissly projected so well? But still just projected as the 4th best tight end, tied with Pat Freiermuth. Wait, what is this? I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, not the same projection. Still projects okay, pretty solid point per dollar play. Projecting here for 16% ownership. How much do you say you're getting?
14, but he's going to be more than 16.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Any other tight ends you get into?
I have him projected for 30. I also have him optimal 27%. Like, there's no way he's 16.
I'm saying I'm asking would you consider Kolar? Maybe some positive coach speak there. They've kind of said like he didn't, the coach speak was like, he didn't block at all in college. So he had to like learn how to block. Now they're saying, we can use him as, a multifaceted tight end. So there has been some positive coach speak for Charlie Kolar. I don't think it's I've played worse plays. I'll say that. But what was it last week? How much did you play?
3% route participation.
Okay. So that's pretty bad. 1 route run last week. 5 the week prior. Yeah, I'm probably 4 targets on 5 routes in week 5. That's pretty insane.
Yeah. Same sentiment for me. Like, I'm not going to have him. I have him as a very low probability play. The last time I played a 2-game slate and won a lot of money, I would have won a lot more if something called Austin Barner didn't happen. So, sure, you can use somebody like Kohler. It's not the craziest thing in the world. Maybe it'll work out and win you a lot of money, but I won't have him.
Good question from our old pal Emax is how many likes until Adam puts on a flannel? Heck, I wore a flannel when I did a show with Neil. I don't think I remember that, Emac. Do you own a flannel, Adam?
I wore one recently, I think.
Did you? Yeah.
I think so. So we talked about if it was a flannel or not, and I said I had no idea.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. You just didn't know that if it is actually flannel fabric. All right. Any other tight ends? I don't think there were any that were really, let's see, in terms of projection. Actually, I'll go back to Roto Grinders. You've got McBride, Otten, Andrews Likely, Dissly, Kolar, Tomlinson. So you could make a case for like maybe Tomlinson or Smart. Maybe Smart comes in and plays a little bit more of a role than he did last week, but I don't know that I'm getting there. It is the one position where it's like typically you can say like it's possible all the tight ends fail. I feel like it's less likely that nobody puts up any fantasy points when you have Trey McBride on the slate. Like I think it's a better tight end slate than like sometimes I like to play through like, yeah, I guess if this 2,500 guy like randomly has 2 catches and a touchdown, he could be optimal just because of the price tag. And maybe like it's possible none of the tight ends do anything. I feel like that's less likely on this slate. So I don't really think I'm going there, but do you see anybody you like?
No. If I did, it would be like Cola or Smart or something like that. But it's basically the same thing as, I was just mentioning Barner on the slate that I did well on, the 2 game slate I did well on, that was the Sam Laporta slate where he sucked. He scored like 7 points. If he had a good game, I'd just probably win everything. But even with 7 points, I basically had like the second best lineup that anybody had, because 7 points was still 7 points at tight end. And that's kind of what you have with McBride here too, I think. So I do think, like, looking from an optimal standpoint, that paying down at tight end is still the way to go. Otten and Disley for me are showing up as the 2 most optimal tight ends, well ahead of McBride. Like, I think McBride is going over-owned from a optimal versus ownership standpoint by quite a bit. But I still think McBride's a really good play, just because the ceiling is so high. And then you factor in things like Kyler's under-owned. So it doesn't matter as much that McBride's over-owned, the balances out type stuff. So, I do, as usual, think that paying down at tight end is the way to go. But obviously McBride looks good.
Yep. All right. I think that's all on tight ends. I know you probably want to get out of here and make some lineups, but first, any thoughts on no kickers on the main slate? But do you have any thoughts on defenses? How do we handle defenses? We already talked about, like, you will play defenses against the opposing offense. Do you have any hot takes on a favorite defense here?
Let me try and pull back up that build. It keeps messing up every time I switch off the screen. I will say I don't have a favorite defense in terms of like one that I think is great or anything. I might have one that's showing up a lot, but I also just lost. I'm back to like the 100% Lamar Jackson lineups for whatever reason. So,
all right.
I don't know.
So Adam's stuff is broken. He needs to go make some lineups. Do you have any other thoughts before you head out, Adam?
I just reloaded those lineups. So Cardinals are my highest owned defense right now, followed by Tampa, followed by the Ravens, and I barely have any Chargers, which, again, all of that makes sense with the total players that I said I was playing. I don't have any Herbert. Makes sense that I'm getting them more the Cardinals, etc. So as usual, defense for me, I think, is just pretty much whatever works, whatever fits into the lineup that you're making.
I usually like set a cap on my defense and a lot of randomness and then let it do its thing. Generally, it's just a tough thing. Usually I'm trying to attack the opposing quarterback. But yeah, no real major thoughts on defense for the 2 game slate. I'm just going to have a split. Anything else, Adam, before you head out?
Nope.
All right. Subscribe to Endgame Syndicate YouTube. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to Adam's Substack. The link is in the description of this video. Adam, appreciate it. As always, fun breaking it down with you, and good luck tonight.
Yeah, thanks. You too. See you guys.
All right. Later. All right. With Adam out of here, let's talk some Showdown. So we've done I think we can go over Showdown pretty quickly because we've already done all of the usage stuff. I'm not going anywhere, JJ. I mean, you can take off. If you hate me and you only love Adam, you can take off, but I'm going to stick around just briefly and take a look at some Showdown stuff. So we'll pull that up. The first game is the Baltimore-Tampa Bay game. We already have inactives for this one. So I'll pull that one up and we can just take, I'm going to do this one pretty briefly, guys, because we already did the full position by position stuff. So I'm not going to redo all of that on Showdown. I'm just going to do kind of a brief look at ownership. We'll start with captain ownership. I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go position by position. Lamar, 20.5% ownership. He's one of the rare quarterbacks that I just have no issue with. 20, like, that's totally fine. I might even be above 20.5% Lamar in captain. I think he's going to look really strong here. He had so much on the ground. He has a great matchup. Yeah, no, it's good. I'm good with 20.5% Lamar Jackson. No issue there. Baker Mayfield, 11%. As you might guess, yeah, I'm overweight to him on the main slate. I'll probably be above weight to 11% Baker Mayfield in the captain spot. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold that I will, because I might be more interested in playing some of the pass catchers at lower ownership. So less sold there. I'm more likely to play Lamar at captain, I think, than Baker. It's possible I'm underweight here, but I'm probably not going to force it. If I get to 15% Baker, I would have no issue with that. Derrick Henry. This is kind of boring because I don't see any major outliers that I think are wrong in terms of ownership. I think that the players who have the highest chance of having a huge game are the players getting ownership here. It's pretty flat, no huge outliers here. So as much as I would love to have some major take on any of these players, I think these ownerships look generally fine. Mike Evans, sub 7%. I like that. I think that's one that I would probably target. I don't love, so I think I like the high end better. So I might just focus on like kind of these top 6 here. Don't particularly love going with K. Dotton at captain. But 4% is, not that egregious to me. That seems kind of okay, given that he has been targeted like 5 times per game. Tough to get to the running backs on Tampa Bay just because it should be a split. Even if they do put up a score that you want on the main slate, I think it's less likely that one of them puts up a score that is the optimal captain. So I don't think I'm going to go to the Tampa Bay running backs at captain. I think I'd be more inclined to go to them at flex. Kind of similar with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, I think he's more. It's close. He's cheaper, so it's lets you do a little bit more. You can kind of make a case for they've been using him a little bit more, so it's possible he does have a bigger game. Not going to any Nelson Aguilar at captain. You can kind of see it with Rashad Bateman. Justice Hill seems fine, 2%. I could see myself going there. Defense is probably not for me at captain on this one. Maybe the Ravens defense I would consider at captain. I don't think I'd go to the Bucs defense at captain. Yeah, I think for the most part, I'm probably going to be focused largely on these top 6 at captain. It's not a slate where I'm really venturing too far away from the top, but yeah, Lamar kind of stands out to me as that seems actually a little bit lower than I would expect it to be for Lamar. So I don't have any issue with that captain ownership. Brandon says this showdown slate is a jam the studs and find the value pieces to round it out. That might be accurate. I actually missed signing up for the main slate for the showdown slate, so you guys will have to let me know who actually wins. I entered the $3.20 max and was going to come back later, and I went back like 2 hours ago and it had filled, so I got into a secondary contest. So sadly, I won't be able to track that. In the flex, 50% Lamar, so he's only at like 70% total ownership. I guess that is he's pretty expensive, and we do have several expensive, pretty good options here. So that actually seems fine to me. I was going to say it seems low, but with all the other expensive options, I think that's actually okay. Baker Mayfield 9,600, 44% ownership in the flex. I like that. I'll be on that. Chris Godwin, 35.5% feels pretty good to me. Zay Flowers, only 8,600. I mean, that stands out. 8,600, only getting 35% ownership. Yeah, he should be higher than that at 8,600. Allows you to do a lot more. So I like the Zay Flowers. 10,800 for Derrick Henry. Not really involved much in the passing game. You probably need touchdown and two of either 100-yard bonus or touchdowns for Derrick Henry to get there. Probably just one touchdown without the 100-yard bonus, probably not going to be enough for Derrick Henry. I mean, if he gets to, a touchdown and 80 yards and does have, an outlier 2 reception game, then maybe that's enough for Derrick Henry. But the price tag is high enough that it's going to require either multiple touchdowns or a 100-yard bonus with a touchdown to pay off this price tag in a game that should be high scoring. So I don't totally love it. I think I'll probably fade it slightly for Derrick Henry. I'm also a notorious starting running back hater on Showdown, so that tends to be the way I go, even in this matchup. And we can take a look at the schedule adjusted stuff. I think we looked at it earlier, but let me just pull this back up. It's a middling to like slightly below average matchup for Derrick Henry. Better matchup for the Baltimore passing game. He's Derrick Henry. He's just a freak of nature. He can do it against any defense, so it's not like the biggest thing in the world, but you still would prefer if it was the Panthers or somebody else. So I do think it will be a slight fade for me on Derrick Henry. Mike Evans, only 30.5% ownership in a great matchup. Looks pretty good to me. Kate Otten, 23%, no issue there. Nelson Aguilar, man, that's a lot of ownership. 21% to Nelson Aguilar as just a guy who never really puts up a ton of fantasy points. That is probably going to be a light fade for me. Maybe I'll have half of this, try to get to about 10% Nelson Aguilar. That's too much ownership for me for Nelson Aguilar, even on Showdown. Justice Hill, I like that quite a bit. 19.75% projected ownership at 3,800. He has a role on the team. He gets those PPR points. If he scores a touchdown, can obviously spike an upside. So that ownership number looks good to me on Justice Hill. Mark Andrews, I mean, you kind of like the volatility on a 1-game slate, 19% ownership. Hasn't really had a massive game yet this year, but you have to imagine that is coming. So I don't hate that on Mark Andrews. I think that is a reasonable number. Do I need to refresh this? I don't think I probably need to, but let me just just see if, yeah, it doesn't look like anything changed. I saw somebody bring up that Tez Walker is active for this game, which I don't really think he's going to have much of a role. He could surprise us. I'm guessing he's not projected for anything. Bateman, 22% projected ownership in the flex. That feels pretty good. 6,400. I think I'll come in overweight to that. He's, again, had a pretty good role this year. It is a mess with the running backs in Tampa. So let's take a look. So the ownership on Rashad White, 6,600, 22% ownership. Bucky Irving, 7,000, 15% ownership. Sean Tucker, just under 10% ownership at 4,000. I kind of like all of those. Those all look pretty strong to me. The ownership coming in about where I think it probably should be, or even a little bit lighter than I would like it to be. I think my favorite of the group is probably no. I was going to say Rashad White is really interesting because he is the passing game back, so he gets those PPR points theoretically. There is obviously the concern that he's going to lose some of his role with how good Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker were last week. So I'm not 100% convinced that Rashad White is going to get the bulk of the work. But still, 6,600, 22% ownership. I think I'm going to try to get to at least like 30% Rashad White. It's not going to be a 60% type play where I'm tripling the field, but I think I want to be above weight to that just in case he does have that role that he had in the past. Not the best matchup with the Ravens. I think I'll be above weight to 22%, probably get to around 30% Rashad White. I don't love him as much in the captain, but I think just kind of move that ownership to the flex. And I do think I'll be right around there, around 30% on Rashad White. The matchup is the one thing that I'm like, can't get too excited about it. Bucky Irving, 15%. Seems okay. Like I'm not trying to get above weight to that. If I get to 15%, I'm not going to fade it. I wouldn't be shocked if I end up a little bit light on 15% Bucky Irving, just because the price tag is, he's 7,000, not really as involved in the passing game. He could be. I think he's capable of being a passing game back, but he has not been to this point. It's a little bit muddled. So I think I prefer Rashad White over Bucky Irving just because of that passing game role and the lower price tag, but not a huge thing. But then Sean Tucker, I mean, 10% ownership at 4,000 feels pretty decent to me, just based on the coach speak. I was hoping it was going to be like 4%, but I still think that is very playable at 10%. I think I'll be right, probably a little bit above that on Sean Tucker. And then we have so we've talked about all the running backs, the wide receivers. Jalen McMillan, I mean, if he's going to come at 4% ownership, I'd be a little bit surprised if it's there, but 4%, I would definitely be above that on $2,000 Jalen McMillan. It is a place where he might just not have much of a role. He also might have a surprising role here. He could come in and didn't play a ton last week, but we don't know for sure that. They talked about he needs to kind of come along. He is a rookie. He missed multiple weeks. He's not quite there, but maybe this week he does take a step up in terms of usage. Only 5 routes run, 1 target last week. But again, earlier in the year, he was playing. He was their preferred guy to start the year. So maybe he does take on a bigger role here. So if he's going to come in at this low of ownership, I have interest in 4% Jalen McMillan. That stands out as a pretty strong showdown play. Trey Palmer, I prefer McMillan to Trey Palmer for sure. Trey Palmer coming in at higher ownership at a higher price tag. I would rather just lean into Jalen McMillan of the two of them. And then Sterling Shepard, I liked him on the main slate. You can bet I'm going to like him at 13% ownership at 3,000 on the showdown slate. Definitely into that. Kickers and defenses, I think, are fine here. Ravens coming in 16%, Buccaneers 15%, McLaughlin 19%. And then where's Justin Tucker? 14%. That's a pretty good number. It is a game that we're expecting a high scoring game, pretty high total here. Okay, good. I got a scare on the audio, but no, it seems to be here. Okay. I think kickers and defenses look okay. Even in what could be a high scoring game, they can just have a random defensive touchdown, make things work out. So I no issue with the kickers and defenses. We already went position by position, so nothing real to add here. But just the things that kind of stand out to me. Again, it's going to be Sterling Shepard. Again, looks a little bit too low. Jalen McMillan, I like that number. That ownership number at 2,000 looks really good. Sean Tucker at 9% looks, I mean, it's not like a real standout to me just because it is a three-headed monster, but I think it seems fine. I was hoping to be lower. 10%, honestly, I'm probably not taking much of a stand there. Andrews and Likely both coming in pretty low ownership. We love the volatility there on a showdown slate, bringing the ownership down. So I like both Andrews and Likely probably come in overweight to both of them. And I do think you can play both of them. I mean, they're on the field plenty together. So I think no issue with playing both Andrews and Likely in the same lineup. Totally reasonable to do so. Justice Hill, I love that ownership at 3,800. That's that one stands out to me for sure. Aguilar stands out as a fade for me. If he does come in at 21%, I'd be a little bit surprised. I think other places probably have him lighter. But yeah, that would be an absolute fade for me. Whereas Bateman looks pretty good. Otten looks pretty good at 23% ownership, 4,600 seems fine to me. Henry, just a light fade. I really, it scares me. He could obviously put up a huge game, but that's going to be a light fade for me in the flex. I'll still have some at captain. I think the captain ownership on Henry looked pretty solid, as I recall. 11%, yeah, not taking any stand there. Not going to be above that, I think, but that seems like a fair number. All right, I think that's going to do it for this showdown slate. Now let's take a look at the. Actually, I'll play around. Let's just make a lineup real quick for this slate. All right, wait, where are we? Here we go. All right, so I love Lamar at captain here. Maybe let's build a Lamar captain lineup. As far as correlations go, you obviously don't need to stack Lamar. You can play him naked wherever. You can play him naked in the flex. You can even play him naked in the captain spot. I'm still just always going to prefer having a stack with my quarterback in the captain spot. So I will have a stacking partner. I'm just going to go to Zay Flowers. Might even double stack it here. I'll think about who I want for that double stack. Sterling Shepard, again, just kind of stands out. He's a nice value. I'll throw him in there. Could throw Bateman in there. It's kind of expensive. Godwin or Evans? I mean, Baker at 9,600 looks pretty good. Now, I think Godwin it's going to be higher owned, but I'll just throw him in there. Then what do I have left? 1,900. Not if I want to leave salary on the table, so I can't do that. Ooh, I'm 1,000 away from Jalen McMillan. I mean, I could take out Godwin, put in Evans and McMillan as a lineup that could theoretically work. Then you would have McMillan with Shepard, which you can do it on a showdown slate. I'd be less inclined to do it on a main slate. Still not my favorite. So now I think I got to go to, let's see what I can do with Justice Hill in here. So I have 8,500 left over. Did kind of like Rachaad White at 6,600. So now we have 1,900. Could move up here now from Baker to Chris Godwin. Might prefer that. Still leaving 1,100 on the table. Now you have Lamar Jackson paired up with Zay Flowers. Just a single stack there. I mean, unless you include Justice Hill, who is a pass catching back. So you kind of double stack there with Lamar. You've got Sterling Shepard, Chris Godwin, and Rachaad White, leaving 1,100 on the table. I think this looks like a pretty strong large field tournament lineup. Shouldn't be extremely duped. Correlates well enough a lot of the players that I like. So here you go. Here's one example of a large field lineup that looks pretty good to me. We should get. When does the second game start? Are we getting inactives in just 1 minute for the second game? Because I kind of want to wait for those. Okay, we did. Looks like we just got it. Ladd McConkey is active. Quentin Johnston, Hayden Hurst inactive. So everything as expected so far. So yeah, before we go into the second game, yeah, there we go. Just want to make sure I have all of the inactives here. I'm just going to search it. I'm getting alerts for all of the main ones, but just want to make sure I'm not missing anything actionable. Chargers inactives. Yep, Joey Bosa out as expected. Darius Davis is out. I believe we don't have Chark. I think DJ Chark needed to be called up. I might need to double check that, but looks like it is largely as expected. No Hayden Hurst, no Darius Davis. Ladd McConkey is in. Quentin Johnston is also out. Let me just double check on DJ Chark. Yeah, it looks like everybody, he must have been on the practice squad because I've seen multiple indications that he would have. Yeah, okay. So DJ Chark not playing tonight. So we know that. They did also call up Jalen Rager, who I'm not playing any Jalen Rager. Yeah, I don't think can't get myself to do that. Let me look at Cardinals inactives. Xavier Wheeler, the last week's star receiver, is inactive for this game. Nobody else who I was going to even think about playing anyway. Most of the defensive players. Then we have a tight end called Travis Vokalek is inactive. Don't even know who that is. So yeah, no impactful inactives for me on the Cardinals. Okay, yeah, he was on IR. Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, so not on the practice squad, but he was on IR and needed to be activated. The kick is Trey Palmer going to catch a 0 tonight? I'd say probably a greater than 50% chance that he will. Yes, but I don't know for sure. All right, so we already built one lineup here. Let's do a review of the second game now that we have inactives. Hopefully, we have this all set up right. Do we have Davis out? McConkey in. Let's see. Because obviously, if we don't have the right inactives, it would change the ownership a little bit. Although Darius Davis, yeah, he has a projection, but he's also projected for like 0 ownership, so he's not really going to 2% ownership on in the flex, so he's not going to affect things that much. I think we can do the review without any changes here. It was kind of as we were all expecting. All right, captain ownership. J.K. Dobbins, 19.7% projected ownership. It's okay. Not a huge standout to me. Kyler Murray, 16%. James Conner, 11%. Justin Herbert, 10.5%. McConkey looks good to me at 9%. I like that ownership number on McConkey at captain. Just could see a ton of targets here. So I like that. He's pretty cheap. So that stands out to me as a number that I like. Trey McBride really stands out. I mean, Marvin Harrison at 5% seems okay. Certainly has, the upside to pay something off. I'm not in love with Marvin Harrison in general today, but I think that seems fine at 5%. But Trey McBride at 5%, I really like that number. A little bit cheaper than Marvin Harrison, has the better role than Harrison, better matchup for McBride. So that stands out to me as somebody that I'll be very interested in playing at captain. Trey McBride going to be a focus for me, I think. Josh Palmer, 3.5%, not a huge stand there. Michael Wilson, 3%. Yeah, nobody else really standing out. That Trey McBride is the one that, like, probably my favorite captain when you factor in ownership. He looks like the best contrarian captain to me. Nobody else really standing out as a great captain play. We'll find some different ways to differentiate in the flex. Yeah, I'd say favorites factoring in ownership, probably McBride and McConkey. I don't have any real issue with the Dobbins, Murray, Connor ownership, but or Herbert even, but not like priorities for me. Just like they kind of look fine at that ownership number. In the flex, we have Kyler at 52%. I think that is a pretty strong number for Kyler. I have no issue with that. I think the rushing floor, the matchup without Joey Bosa, everything looks pretty good for Kyler Murray. So I'll probably be right with the field there. 43% going to Justin Herbert. I mean, at 9,000, I think it's reasonable. Doesn't need to do nearly as much. Has a decent matchup with the Cardinals. So I think I like that number better than his captain ownership number. J.K. Dobbins, 39%. I mean, he had 25 carries last week. Not super involved in the passing game, but if he's going to have 20 plus carries, yeah, he's going to look good. He's 9,400, looks good there. James Conner, I don't know. I don't love this number. I guess the matchup is easier with no Joey Bosa. Just look at. I don't think it was a great matchup for. Yeah, it was like basically just average, like exactly average matchup, but should get a little bit easier with no Joey Bosa there. I think maybe affects the run game a little bit. Also, yeah, 37%. Not. I think I'm fine with it. Not a number that I'm scared of. I like Lad McConkey much better at 32.5% at 7,800. 2,000 cheaper than James Conner, getting less ownership. I really like that for Lad McConkey. Really like this number for Trey McBride. So if I'm forced to, I could see myself coming down off of 37% James Conner a little bit. Same thing I would say for Justin Herbert. Could see myself coming down to that number. I'd prefer to have more of Murray, Lad McConkey, Trey McBride, kind of bring these guys up. Marvin Harrison, that 27% might even come lower than that. That's not a huge stand for me. I could see myself being lower than 20% Marvin Harrison. Or, maybe closer to 20% instead of 27%. Josh Palmer, 24% feels a little bit high at 5,400, just given that, you look at his last week, not great route participation. He was 52% route participation, has not really had a score that you want yet this year. So just has not been very good. Doesn't mean he can't be. Obviously, this could be his breakout game. Just 2 targets last week. But the role has not been amazing for Josh Palmer. Seems like they keep giving him opportunities. He keeps on kind of disappointing. So don't love it, but not like a major fade for me at 24%. It's just a 1-game slate. I'll probably be a little bit light there. Similarly with Michael Wilson. I mean, he's 7,600. 22% ownership. He's running all the routes. Has not been that amazing anyway, but I think 22% ownership is probably fine at 7,600. Kamani Vidal, though, I kind of like this number at 20.5% ownership, 4,400. Just the coach speak made it seem like maybe he will have more of a role. Kind of unclear because, again, that was a game that we saw 25 carries from J.K. Dobbins, so no real guarantee that that if the whole pie shrinks, no real, we're not sure that we're going to have any Kamani Vidal. Like, he might just be not get any play if they don't have much of a running game. They might just give it all to J.K. Dobbins. Let's see. Will Dissly, I love this number. He's 2,800, 18.5% ownership, taking over as the starting tight end. Yeah, I mean, that looks awesome. I'll be definitely above weight to 18.5% Will Dissly. Simi Fehoko is active. He was coming in with a shoulder injury. 13% ownership at 1,200. I like that. Simi Fehoko is probably going to be the wide receiver 3 here, I believe. How is this projected? I believe he's projected as a wide receiver 3 on the Chargers, behind Lad McConkey. Then you have Josh Palmer. Simi Fehoko projected to be the wide receiver 3 at 1,200, projecting for 13% ownership. I think that's a really good number. I like that. So yeah, I don't think you need to get as into the Eric Tomlinson, Stone Smart, Trey Benson. I would rather play Amari DiMercato than Trey Benson pretty clearly. I mean, he's 4,000, so that's part of the reason he's getting lower ownership, whereas Trey Benson is 36. I mean, he's actually not that much cheaper. Yeah, Amari DiMercato is just, he has the better role than Trey Benson. Trey Benson has more of that name recognition, but yeah, on the season, Amari DiMercato, 26.4% route participation, 11 targets. Trey Benson just 2 targets on the year. I'm curious why. So their expected fantasy points on the season actually closer than I would have guessed, which probably means Trey Benson has had a look or two at the goal line since he's not really involved. Oh, I guess he also has 30 rushes to Amari DiMercato's 12. Yeah, I think I'm going to prefer Amari DiMercato of the 2 of them. Again, just last week, 7 targets, 52.8% route participation. I don't think it's real, but promising to see that they could give him that much work. Some nice contingent value there for Amari DiMercato. So that would be my preference of the 2 of them. All right, I'm gonna look at your questions in a second here. Just want to finish off the thought. Anybody else that I'm probably not playing Zay Jones here? Could have a role. I think he's more of. Oh no, it's 6,400. Is this real? That's insane. Yeah, I'm not playing Zay Jones at 6,400. All right, and I don't think I'm playing Jalen Reagor. He has been priced, so I'd be more inclined to go there than Zay Jones, but I think they're both just fades for me. Kickers, defenses, 18% for the Chargers, 15% for the Cardinals. Chad Ryland, 22%. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, 24%. Those all seem fine to me. No major stands there. Okay, I'll look at some questions here, man. We keep getting bots in here. Yeah, I mean that is largely true. The 3K and 4K guys are murky throw-in darts, but I have some pretty clear preferences of the cheaper guys. Those being primarily, I mean, Demercado, I prefer, but he does fall into the kind of murkier range. I'm with you on that. Um, Vidal 4,400 looks pretty good. Um, but Will Dissly at 2,800, so he's, I guess, a little bit cheaper than the range you're talking about. But I really like Will Dissly there. I really like Simi Fehoko, so kind of, I guess, lower than the range you're talking about. I think are more, interesting to me. They're a little bit still, I guess, pretty murky. But I think Simi Fehoko, pretty good chance that he's the wide receiver 3 here. Will Dissly is the starting tight end, so those less murkiness in the slightly cheaper range there. Palmer or Bateman. Probably Bateman for me, just has the better role. It's not like a easy question to answer, but I would say Bateman would be my preference there. Flowers or Godwin, probably Godwin. Pretty close, but yeah, I think I'm gonna have more Godwin than Flowers, I would guess. Best defensive players out for the Chargers. This is a fade at highest rate. I think Adam said that he's getting to the least of them. I would guess I'm also going to get to the least of the Chargers. Also don't love that, Kyler runs, so it's kind of less passing. So yeah, I think that makes sense to be largely a fade. Let's see. Chargers a slug pace team. Yeah, I mean that's also true. They just play really slowly. They run a lot. I'm not going to Jalen Reagor. I just don't think he's any good. I don't think that they have any reason to want to play him. Let's see. Cheapest guy you would play in Baltimore, Tampa Bay. Do you mean for Showdown or for? Let me look on Showdown slate. I assume you're talking Showdown. So salary, going to the flex. I don't know if there's any. Actually, let me hide the non-projected players. I don't think I'm going to go to Patrick Ricard. Actually, somebody asked about him, so let me just look at Patrick Ricard real quickly. So in week 6, Patrick Ricard, zero carries both week 6 and week 5. 0 targets in either of those. He just doesn't, you would maybe hope that he would get a goal line look, but is he ever going to get a goal line look when they have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson? I don't really think so. So I don't think I'm going to go that low. Even on Showdown. Yeah, 0 expected fantasy points on the year. Just has had 0 looks, 0 targets, 0 rushing attempts. So no, I don't think you need to go to Ricard. All right, let's see who else. Jalen McMillan. I think maybe Charlie Kolar. I think Charlie Kolar. We didn't even talk about him, but yeah, I think he's an interesting play on Showdown. I didn't like him as much for the main slate, but I actually think Charlie Kolar at 1,600, 6% projected ownership. Some positive coach speak about how they can use him more now. He's a multifaceted tight end. So I do think Charlie Kolar is playable. He would probably be the cheapest that I would consider playing in Baltimore, Tampa Bay. Jalen McMillan, a little bit more likely to get into my lineups, but I think I might have a share or two of Charlie Kolar. I think he's definitely playable. If I have any Buccaneers pass catchers, is having Derrick Henry okay? Yeah, that's totally fine on a 2-game slate. Just a 2-game slate, so you don't have to worry as much about that correlation. Flowers, Hill, and Dissly with 300 left, or Connor, Otten, and Bateman with 100 left for the DK main slate. Flowers, Hill, and Dissly, or Connor. Probably depends on the rest of your lineup. I think both look pretty fine, but I guess I'll go with the one that leaves 300 on the table. Top exposure captain in Arizona and LAC. I think it was going to be probably Trey McBride. I mean, top exposure. He's the one that I would probably be most over the field on, at least. Let's see. Which in this case might be Probably either Trey McBride or Lad McConkey. I might have more to Kyler Murray. I'll be, you know, I might be with the field on Kyler Murray and over on McBride and or McConkey. If I were just hand building one lineup, I would probably slot McBride into the captain spot. Well, you're insane, Brandon. No, that seems fine. I'm not going there with Ricard or Kieft, but I get it. Yes, I do realize. That's why I'm doing both of them. But the first one had 100,000 at first also, so I like to do both of them. All right. Best defense on the main slate. I just split out my defenses, so I don't give a ton of thought to it. But let me just think briefly about who would be on the main slate the best defense. Bring in, where's this slate? There we go. Take a look at the ownership. Probably wait. Cardinals at 16%. I think they're Cardinals being the lowest owned defense, being the second cheapest. Yeah, I think Cardinals. If they're coming in at 16% ownership, I would probably just go with the Cardinals there. Outside of the Cardinals, I think Ravens, and I don't even hate playing the Ravens against Baker in a Baker Mayfield stack. But yeah, I think Cardinals stand out to me as probably my favorite defense at ownership. Disley, Bateman, Godwin, or Wilson, Otten, Flowers, DK, Deep Field, GPP. Disley, Bateman. Man, that's tough. Probably the first one. I really like Disley. I think he looks great at tight end. Godwin, probably the best, just like raw. I think he has the best raw projection at wide receiver. He's going to look good. The ownership not too crazy. Bateman, it's pretty close. I think it comes down to I think I slightly prefer Bateman over Michael Wilson, but I don't even know if that's true. Who do you have at quarterback? I would have your quarterback with the better receiver would be my preference. I got this hat from my friend Scott Barrett. Sent it to me. Derrick Henry today or James Conner, your favorite? Yeah, I know. So Adam was saying he's probably going to have more of James Conner because he's coming in at lower ownership. I don't know if the ownership is low enough that I prefer Connor over Henry. Maybe he's also cheaper. So yeah, it might be James Conner factoring in the price tag. But obviously Henry projects 2.5 fantasy points better than James Conner. He's going to look great. But yeah, I think probably slight preference for James Conner there, given the passing game. Is a little bit more of that passing role. He's at least more capable as a pass catcher, and it's a good spot for him to potentially catch passes, as Fantasy Guru Drew pointed out on Twitter. So I think I'll go with the cheaper James Conner there. All right, I think it's time to go make some lineups. I think we've covered everything that I have. Oh, and I already did the lineups. Did I play around with the lineup for the second game? Maybe I didn't do that. So maybe I need to do that first too. Yeah, I didn't. I did not do that. So let's build one lineup or two maybe for the second game, and then I'll head out. So that one is starting in. There we go. So as I said, if I'm hand building one lineup, I'm probably throwing Trey McBride into the captain spot. Let's see if I can put in Kyler and Lad McConkey. Just get some of my favorites in there right away. Now I want to go cheap. Will Disley 2,800 wasn't getting that crazy high of ownership, so I'll throw him in there. Now I have two pass catchers for the Chargers, so I might want to think about throwing Justin Herbert into this lineup, especially now if I do Simi Fehoko. Now I could throw Justin Herbert in here. Now I have 4,000 left on the table. So now the question is, what are the odds of all of McConkey, Disley, and Fehoko hitting without Justin Herbert being the optimal captain instead of Trey McBride? I think because of the price tags, it's certainly possible. 4,000, a little bit more than I typically like to leave on the table. I don't like set a rule against it, but it's not really the range that I'm usually hoping to get to. But is there anybody that's an obvious must upgrade. I don't know what there is. So Herbert could be James Conner instead, but I don't think I want to change out. So now I need Herbert to outscore Dobbins and James Conner here, but with the 3 pass catchers from the Chargers, I don't know if that's my preference. I might want to switch out one of these pass catchers for a non-pass catcher, just from the slight concern about having so many pass catchers without Herbert in the captain spot. So maybe I want to get rid of one of the pass catchers I have in here. And that could be swap out Disley for Kamani Vidal. Leaves 2,400 on the table. Or Dicker the kicker, maybe. Maybe that's a good if we throw Dicker the kicker in there, because now you're saying, Herbert is throwing enough kind of PPR in his way. Fehoko, Lad McConkey racking up PPR points, and then they get into field goal range. They don't score the touchdown, and Justin Herbert not putting up enough to be the optimal captain. So I think this kind of makes sense. Leaves 1,800 on the table. Got Herbert stacked with Fehoko and Lad McConkey, but it's not overly stacked, so you don't need like a massive game here. You got McBride with Kyler Murray. Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. You're condensed. Kyler Murray throwing a lot to Trey McBride, more spread out on the Chargers side. They're settling for a few field goals. I think this looks good, leaving 1,800 on the table. All right, I'm missing some questions here. All right. Any other? Pickles Pub less in your face than the Manhole in Chicago, circa 2011. Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody asking about FanDuel. So unless anybody has any questions about FanDuel, I'll probably head out. But if any of you, I'll give you a bit to if you want to talk about FanDuel briefly, I can take a look at the ownership numbers. Haven't seen, and Dan usually is in here asking about FanDuel. Haven't really looked at the slate, so it would be new to me if we did. Jeff says FanDuel's Monday 2-game contests suck. All right, so no need to look at FanDuel. Maybe Dortch I think is fine. Yeah, we can. I mean, Dortch is definitely playable. What is his? Do I have the right game pulled up here? No, I don't have. I'm assuming you're talking about Showdown. I think he's playable on the main slate. What is Dortch coming in at? 10% ownership. I think that's totally reasonable. 4,100 Dortch. Again, he has pretty decent role. Week 6, 63.9% route participation, 5 targets. The week prior, just 1 target on 48.5. But then in week 4, 96% route participation, saw 4 targets. Yeah, I think he's just going to have a decent role. So yeah, I think Dortch is very much in play on the main slate, and then on the Showdown slate. Yeah, 14% ownership at 5. Yeah, no, he actually looks pretty good. 14% ownership at 5,200. That's a good call up. I actually like that for Greg Dortch. Don't hate that at all. Yeah, that seems like a pretty good number. I'd probably want to be on top of that for Dortch. Yeah, no, you got to get to Dortch. I mean, it's not like the hugest priority for him, but he does look pretty good. Ownership there on the Showdown slate. I'm with you. I think that looks like a solid number on Showdown. Yeah, that's good. Good note from Nerdy Tenor. Dortch, the most fun player to say out loud. Yeah, why did you guys not bring out Dortch earlier? So I could have said it earlier. Happy first day of FanDuel Sports Network. I saw that. Yeah, is that the Timberwolves are going to be on FanDuel Sports Network now. All right, just got here. Is Zay Jones a play? I don't think I'm playing Zay Jones anywhere. I think they've said they want to be careful with him. He might have a role here. I wouldn't play him on the main slate. You could consider him on Showdown. I just don't think he's going to see much volume. He could be like the backup tight end, just like gets in there for a few plays, randomly has a touchdown, but just based on coach speak and stuff, I don't really think Zay Jones is going to be a full-time player today. I don't know if he's going to be all year, but I think especially today, they say they want to be careful with him, so I don't think he's going to be getting a ton of volume today, if any. All right, now I need to go make some lineups because I got to make my main slate and my showdown lineups before this thing starts. So really appreciate all of you hanging out here as we went through this 2-game slate. If you haven't already done so, please do like the video, subscribe to both YouTube channels, both the Flaniverse and the Endgame Syndicate. We would very much appreciate it as we are trying to grow our small channels. I'll have some NBA content, not like an everyday thing for me. I haven't figured out exactly how that's going to work, but I should have some NBA content here as well. A lot going forward, but appreciate you all. Like, subscribe, comment, all of that is very helpful. Appreciate you. Good luck tonight. Let's win some money, and I will